for bad stuff, about knowledge that the CIA has done some very bad stuff. And I just wonder now whether you would say to young Americans today that joining the CIA is an honorable thing to do.
It's a big question. The CIA has done, as you say, some bad stuff. There is a history where mistakes have been made, some purposely, some not purposely. Mistakes have been made. There's probably not another organization as large as the CIA. They couldn't say, looking over their shoulder, yeah, we shouldn't have done that. That was a bad decision. There's plenty of that. I talk to lots of young people. I tell them it is an honorable profession. It's an opportunity. It's an opportunity to make a difference in the governing of this country. I felt it was a responsibility to get involved in one way or another. It's a profession that needs to be done. Our country can't go staggering forward without having some sense of what the rest of the world is doing, what we have to respond to next. You need intelligence. You need to know, what are they prepared to do? Do they have a bottom line? What are we prepared to do? Can we counter that with this? That's how policy is made.
The world still needs spies.
The world needs spies probably more than ever.
Jana Mendes, thank you very much for joining me on Hard Talk.
My pleasure.
That was Hard Talk. I'm Saroja Coelho. You're listening to CBC Radio 1. Have a great day.
Good morning, Manitoba, and hello, Winnipeg. I'm Marcy Marcusa. This is Information Radio. We are live downtown. Once again, an extreme cold warning for southern Manitoba. Today, we're into the deep freeze. It'll get a little bit better as we go through the week here. Thanks for joining us. We're on air until 8:37 a.m., and the commute so far pretty good. I'm finding it very icy out there, so take it easy. Keep that in mind. Normal winter driving, but 788-3093 is where you can reach us. So let's say good morning to the team. The triumphant return of Corey Funk. Good morning, Corey. Corey directs the show, giving you a wave on YouTube there, and we'll also be on the air covering the commute. Good morning to Abby Adeyemi, who's our technical producer behind the board. Abby's going to cover weather on the show as always. And in a special appearance this week, Travis Peterson's in. Good morning, Trav. Trav's our YouTube producer and overall, and working the controls this morning, filling in for Kevin. So nice to see you early. Let's get into what's going on in our news center. Heather Wells is in, and she's starting, I'm not sure where. There's a lot of news.
Good morning. Yes. Government billboards around Winnipeg, you may have seen them, boast of a hydro rate freeze. However, critics say it's not official yet. Manitoba Hydro has said it will not ask for an increase this year, although only the Public Utilities Board has authority to change or freeze rates. We'll hear more about these billboards coming up. And speaking of a freeze, Manitobans can expect to see an end to this 4-day deep freeze later today. The frigid weather has been especially hard on the homeless population. In Winnipeg, the Downtown Community Safety Partnership has been responding for calls to help. We'll hear about that coming up in our next local news at 6:30.
All right. Thank you, Heather.
You're welcome.
Right now, our temperature is minus 28 this morning in Winnipeg, in case you're curious. Feels like minus 41. Well, this morning on the program, we're about to hear on World Report everything about last night. Donald Trump now is president again of the United States. It was made official. And yes, he's talking tariffs. He put a date on it, February 1st, for a possibility for that 25% tariff. Of course, all across Canada, we're watching this. It could have deep impacts here in Manitoba. So stay tuned. We're going to hear more about what he had to say last night. So a lot of analysis of Trump and what he had to say and sign yesterday. In his first moments in office. So stay tuned. Plus, we've got some listener lines. You called us about your most beautiful stories about flowers.
Today on Q with Tom Power. Tamara Lindemann, a.k.a. The Weather Station, is back with her brand new, highly anticipated album, Humanhood. In it, she chronicles a difficult mental health period in her life as she navigated an increasingly fractured and warming world. Tamara will be here to tell you how she turns to music to make sense of it. That's coming up on Q, followed by Commotion with Elamine Abdel Mahmoud on CBC Radio 1, the CBC Listen app, and everywhere you get your podcasts.
Good morning. I'm Marcia Young. Donald Trump is beginning his first full day as the 47th president of the United States. Trump is not wasting any time rolling out parts of his agenda, and his mandate is being closely watched by leaders around the world. The CBC's Chris Reyes joins me now from Washington. And Chris, day one, what are we expecting from the new president today?
Yeah, day one indeed. Good morning. This is a country that's now under a national emergency, with an administration empowered with sweeping mandates to deal with illegal immigration and sealing the southern border. That means at any moment, President Trump can activate the military and free up federal resources to deal with the approximately 11 million illegal immigrants in this country and those who may still cross the border. Does that mean that immigration raids will happen today? Not that we anticipate. Those cities like Chicago are preparing for that. Another thing that we can expect today is that more people will be released from jail who were involved in that violent attack on the Capitol on January 6th. And then finally, as of today, the U.S. is no longer a part of the Paris Accord and the World Health Organization.
What else are we expecting from Donald Trump as he gets to work in the White House?
Well, let's talk tariffs. Trump's administration will hit the ground running today with an order to look into the country's trade imbalances, how they affect national security, what can be done to bring down inflation, and how tariffs may help in all of that. He has set a deadline for delivering that report by April this year. Now, he did not sign an order to activate the 25% tariff that he's been threatening against Canada. But when asked when he might impose it, here's what he said from the Oval Office.
We're thinking in terms of 25% on Mexico and Canada because they're allowing vast numbers of people and fentanyl to come in. I think we'll do it February 1st on each.
And so it begins a second term of what we've come to know as the Trump style of governing, essentially a lot of confusion between when a threat becomes an actual order and when a detail is just a negotiation tactic or an actual deadline. We wait and see today. On his schedule is meetings with congressional leaders on the Hill.
Thank you, Chris.
Thank you.
The CBC's Chris Reyes in Washington. For now, that February 1st date Chris mentioned remains a threat and not U.S. government policy. But if Trump follows through, it could devastate Canada's economy. Janice McGregor is in our Parliamentary Bureau. And Janice, let's dig into what Trump is saying. How likely is this to happen?
Marcia, it's not clear this February 1st date is serious. It wasn't part of any prepared speech or formal announcement yesterday. It's not referenced in the 8-page America First trade policy that the administration released last night. It's possible that Donald Trump only said it because a reporter asked about it as the cameras rolled during his photo op, and he didn't want to look like he was backing down. This restated threat is consistent with his false suggestion that tariffs are a way for foreign countries to pay for the income tax cuts that he's promised his supporters. But it's otherwise inconsistent with this published trade policy last night. That document mentions investigating the feasibility of a global supplemental tariff to offset trade imbalances. And Canadians argue that trade here isn't actually unbalanced. It also mentions assessing appropriate trade and national security measures to address unlawful migration and fentanyl flows, which Canadians argue isn't nearly as serious a problem on their border. But the April deadline for that work, Trump's suggestion of tariffs slapping on February 1st would be an action taken before his administration even finishes these investigations.
So how seriously is Canada taking these latest tariff remarks?
Canada's ambassador in Washington will be joining cabinet at its retreat today. We're expecting to hear from the Prime Minister, no doubt other premiers and business leaders too, as everyone processes this. It continues to shape the Liberal leadership race too. Mark Carney out late last night saying correctly that what Trump is musing about would be a blatant violation of our trade agreements. And he's now lining up with his rival, Chrystia Freeland, saying dollar for dollar retaliatory tariffs should be a given. But that's an approach more aggressive and magnitudes more expensive for Canadian businesses and consumers than the initial retaliation that we understand the Trudeau government is working on.
Thanks, Janice.
You're welcome.
The CBC's Janice McGregor in Ottawa. Among Trump's first actions in office, once again withdrawing the U.S. from the Paris Climate Agreement. He did it when he was elected back in 2016. The CBC's international climate correspondent, Susan Ormiston, has more on the move.
The next item here is the withdrawal from the Paris Climate Treaty.
Trump signed the order at a sports arena in Washington. The U.S. will no longer partner with nearly every other country in an international pact to limit global warming and curb harmful carbon emissions.
It is deplorable that the President of the United States has decided to pull out of the Paris Agreement. It is unfortunately not the first time that he's done that.
Environment Minister Stephen Guilbeault says Trump's timing is tragic.
And it is quite ironic that the president would do that as California is going through one of the worst forest fire season in its history.
And on the heels of the hottest year on record, denying a climate crisis, Trump says there's an energy emergency, promising a huge lift in oil and gas production and exports, an end to electric vehicle mandates and other green incentives. It was expected.
Coalitions are strong. People are really connected and working together at the community level.
Climate groups are prepared for the fight back, says Elizabeth Lean with All in America.
States have actually a tremendous amount of power to make sure that they remain focused on those climate goals and the climate agenda.
Biden's administration injected $96 billion of clean energy grants into the economy, but don't expect more, says Kevin Book of Clearview Energy Partners.
I think it's safe to say that the energy transition is still directionally going forward, but it might be going slower.
Trump's team appears determined to unravel the U.S.'s climate agenda. Susan Ormiston, CBC News, Toronto.
Now that Donald Trump is U.S. president, some of Canada's biggest banks are walking away from a global climate coalition. Scotiabank announced yesterday it is leaving the Net Zero Banking Alliance. BMO, National Bank, TD, and CIBC all made similar announcements last Friday. Scotiabank says it is still committed to its climate transition plan. It makes no reference to the banking coalition's goal of reaching net zero greenhouse gas emissions by the year 2050. British Prime Minister Keir Starmer says the murder of 3 young girls must result in systemic change. They were stabbed at a Taylor Swift-themed dance class in July of last year. Now Starmer has ordered a public inquiry.
The tragedy of the Southport killings must be a line in the sand for Britain. We must make sure the names of those 3 young girls are not associated with the vile perpetrator, but instead with a fundamental change in how Britain protects its citizens and its children.
Starmer says authorities need to explain how they failed to stop the attacker, a teenager who was known to be troubled and referred to the government's anti-radicalization program 3 times. The teen pleaded guilty to the killings yesterday and is due to be sentenced on Thursday. A highly contagious stomach bug is on the rise in Canadian cities, and it is hitting people who are homeless especially hard. Edmonton has been experiencing a Shigella outbreak since 2022. Now Vancouver and Toronto are also working to contain its spread. Jennifer Yoon has more.
Workers clean each bed meticulously at Hope Mission Shelter in Edmonton. There's an outbreak of Shigella infections in the city, hitting those without a home the hardest. Shelter manager Elizabeth Klingeberg says it feels like whack-a-mole.
As soon as you would get somebody to the right place, 3 more would pop up.
The bacterial infection causes diarrhea and stomach cramps. There's been an outbreak in Edmonton on and off for 2 years now. CBC tried to speak with someone who had been sick, but nobody wanted to talk. Klingeberg says that shame has made treatment more difficult.
Some people were really hesitant to share about it or mention it. It's embarrassing.
In Toronto, about a dozen people are currently infected, all of them sleeping rough. Local public health thinks there are far more cases out there.
Sticking out hand sanitizer because everybody's getting sick.
Yeah, I know. So does Toronto street nurse Karen Alamir. Prevention methods are as simple as toilet access and a place to wash up, something those without a home can't always find.
If they're outside using outside as a washroom, there's not always running water to wash their hands afterwards.
In Vancouver, where the infection is also making the rounds, public health authorities like Dr. Rohit Vij say access to sanitation is key.
Improving hand washing sinks in homeless shelters or encampments, increasing accessibility of public restrooms in communities.
And with the bug getting harder to treat with antibiotics, prevention is more important than ever, say experts. Jennifer Yoon, CBC News, Toronto.
And that is World Report. I'm Marcia Young.
everyone warned us. It is frigid again this morning. It's minus 27. We've got that extreme cold warning for all of southern Manitoba. Welcome to Tuesday. I'm Marcy Marcusa. This is Information Radio. We're live in downtown Winnipeg on 89.3 FM, 990 AM, on the app and on YouTube. This hour on our program, we are going to be hearing about the devastating drug crisis and stirring a call to action through a new piece of writing. Scott Oake is going to be had a conversation with Faith Fundell about his brand new memoir, For the Love of a Son, and we are going to be hearing that conversation this hour on the program. Scott Oake's also, by the way, on The Current today, so stay tuned for that. In addition, day one, no tariffs right away, but maybe February 1st, as you've been hearing. We're going to get some more analysis of what happened last night. Stay tuned. It was an old movie in the 80s with Rob Lowe. Someone got that out there. 6:11 a.m. is the time right now. Heather Wells joins us. She's here with developing news from our news center this morning. Morning.
Well, we are learning more about an alleged bid rigging scheme involving millions of dollars in public housing contracts. 5 Brandon area contractors were charged in 2022 with conspiracy to commit fraud and conspiring to allocate contracts. We'll hear more about what the I-Team has uncovered coming up. As well, the Manitoba government has billboards all over Winnipeg boasting of a hydro rate freeze. But critics say those ads aren't accurate because the freeze has yet to become official. We're going to hear from the Consumers Association of Canada in our next local news coming up at 6:30.
All right. Thank you, Heather.
You're welcome.
Well, let's get into what's going on in our forecast. Speaking of freezes.
Yeah, good morning. I had to bring out the big guns last night when I wanted to go.
What are you holding up there?
Oh, it's like my skating gloves.
Oh, your
not
serious gloves.
I had to bring out the big guns. Okay, you know what? I need to go plug in the cars, and the plug is in a very weird place.
Okay.
It's underneath the license plate somewhere there. So you need to really either you kneel to get there.
Drives me crazy.
And I was like, I need gloves to do this because it's like placing Legos that will not fit well.
Do you know what drives me crazy? When you're trying to unplug the car plug and it's really stuck in there.
Yeah.
And then you're freezing and your fingers and you're like, I'm not taking my gloves off. And then you take your gloves off and then you're freezing more and then it's still not coming out. And then you're standing there and then you just feel kind of like weeping, except you don't need to cry because your face is already frozen and then it's just melting down your face. And now you're just standing there. And then you're hoping no one sees you. Do you know what? Did I tell you this, what I did by accident?
Bring it on.
Okay, so I was speaking of crying in parking lots. Do you know when it was a little bit milder last week, we had those kind of days where cold then mild?
Mm-hmm.
And then we get that crud that builds up behind the mud flaps, behind the. So you go around and you see your car and maybe you kick it.
I give it a kick.
Right, you give it a kick. Maybe you got a snow broom. Maybe you bang a little bit harder, and it's your car. So you're banging at it to get that off. So I came out of a store and I'm like, oh, I got to get some of this off. So I'm banging at the car and I am not gentle. So I do all this all the way around my vehicle and I go to get in. And it's not my car.
Holy smoke.
Someone else's car.
Did it to the wrong car.
So I'm like, oh my gosh, this isn't my vehicle. But it's the same type of vehicle, obviously. So I just quietly back up, nothing to see here.
Nothing to see.
Move over here. Yeah, anyway. And the person might have come out. I didn't damage anything. Maybe they were happy when they came out.
They're going to be thank you. Someone actually did the job for us.
All right, so we have to bundle up. What's the actual temperature?
Extreme cold continues. We're still seeing wind chills in the minus 40s this morning, and snow is expected in several regions with some blowing conditions, making it even feel colder. And with that extreme cold warning still in place for much of the province, but mostly in the south here. Currently, Winnipeg, it is very cold at minus 27 with cloudy conditions. You step out this morning, it's going to feel like minus 41 on your skin, so take care. Today, we'll see some clouds roll in. Snow will start sometime around noon. We're expecting about 2 centimeters, and we will see some blowing snow in open areas this morning into the afternoon period. It's going to start light and it's going to pick up and become a breezy and gusty. A high for today will get to 14, though with the wind chill factored in, as mentioned, it's going to feel like minus 41. And if we're looking across other parts of the province, this extreme cold and dangerous wind chill chills is being focused in the south, but it's going to be easing a bit by tomorrow. And as mentioned, snow expected in most of the region. Frostbite on exposed skin is still a thing, so you need to take it easy out there. Right now, minus 14 in Winnipeg.
Now, Corey's in to take us all down a peg because he ran in, of course.
Yeah. And it's good motivation to run fast.
I bet it is. Yeah, I bet it is.
I will say, though, despite the cold, the sidewalks actually were really lovely to run on, nice and smooth, not too slippery or anything like that. In terms of the rest of the commute, haven't heard of any major issues out there right now. But if you do see something going on, give me a call on the CBC Commuter line. That number to call, 204-788-3093.
Well, we do begin this morning with a story about Scott Oake, who's a man who wears many hats. He, of course, is an award-winning sportscaster for Hockey Night in Canada. He's the co-founder as well of the Bruce Oake Recovery Centre in Winnipeg, and he's an author. Scott's new book is called For the Love of a Son. It is raw, it's honest, it's a memoir about his late son's struggle with opioid use and how he turned a father's worst nightmare into a second chance for others who are battling addiction. Yesterday, Up to Speed host Faith Fundell had a feature interview with Scott to learn more about the book.
What made you want to write this book and share such a personal story with readers?
Well, it never really was a goal of mine. The genesis of the book was I got a call from an agent at one time, I guess about 3.5, 4 years ago. And he asked me if I'd be interested in writing a book of my career. My answer to that was not a chance.
Yeah.
I think I said to him, I'll write a book of my career when everybody I know is dead. So call me back in 2058. That's a joke, obviously, but the conversation segued into Bruce's journey and the recovery center. And I did express an interest in telling that story. And that became the topic of the book that is being released.
What are you hoping people will take away from this? It's called For the Love of a Son, a memoir of addiction, loss, and hope. What are you hoping people will take away from your story?
I hope that they will understand that addiction is all-encompassing, that it knows no socioeconomic boundaries. If it can happen to our family, we're not special, we're just an ordinary family. But if it can happen to us, it can happen to anyone. And that even though Bruce lost his battle, the Bruce Oake Recovery Center proves that reclaiming your life and a life without alcohol and drugs is possible.
Who was Bruce as a kid? How do you want people to remember him?
When Ann and I would talk about Bruce after he died, it was mostly about the good times we had with him, and there were plenty of them. He was a precocious child, highly entertaining, wicked sense of humor. Diagnosed, though, around the age of 9 or 10 with ADHD, attention deficit hyperactivity disorder, which made him ripe for taking chances, and there weren't many that he didn't take. The consequences be damned. And that had something to do with his descent into addiction. Started on a path that many an addict has followed, which was weed in high school. Didn't separate him from a lot of his friends. But then that propensity to take chances, so why not ecstasy, after that crystal meth, and from there it wasn't a giant leap into the opioids and the drug that would eventually claim his life.
There are a lot of misconceptions about addictions and recovery. What are some of those that you think people ought to know?
Well, the stigma still exists, and we saw it as part of our mission when we were endeavoring to get the Bruce Oake Recovery Center built, that we should try to dispel that. Addiction is not a moral failing. It's a disease. It's commonly referred to as a chronic brain disorder, and I don't think it should be difficult for people to see it that way. What would make a parent choose drugs or alcohol over their kids? If their brain was properly wired, they wouldn't. That would be my take on it. And so, yes, a chronic brain disorder that leads to devastating consequences, and we should see it as a disease, and that anyone who has it, if they want, should be given the opportunity to get healthy again.
When the Bruce Oake Recovery Center, during the conception stage to even when just before it was being built, I mean, there were people who spoke out against it. What was your sense when you think about stigma and think about how people frame it? What was your impression about what was at play here when you heard folks talk about safety or talk about the not in my backyard?
Well, yeah, I completely understood it. When you're trying to establish a treatment center, recovery center in the middle of a residential neighborhood, you should expect pushback. But that pushback usually is the result of people not knowing the difference between a massive difference between active addiction and recovery. Active addiction is ugly. It revolves around drug-seeking behavior. Our family knows as well as anyone how ugly it is. But recovery is at the opposite end of the spectrum. It's a beautiful thing. Those focused on recovery are focused on one thing, and that's maintaining their sobriety. So we ran, I thought, a dignified educational campaign that made the point, and we got through to most of the residents of the area, made the point that they had nothing to fear from the men of the Bruce Oak Recovery Center, and that they would be good neighbors. And that's exactly how it's turned out, I'm proud to say.
Was it hard to write this?
Yes, it was. I've been asked if it was cathartic, and the answer to that is no, not really. Cathartic would mean a psychological release with a lot of emotion. The retelling of Bruce's story through the written word, especially his journey of the last 4 or 5 years of his life, was difficult, and equally or even more difficult telling the story of the passing of my wife, Anne, my beautiful wife of 41 years. It was difficult. Previously, when I would think of something that Bruce had done as a teenager, I might think of that one episode in isolation. But this book lays everything out in chronological order. And I have to say, it is, even though I wrote it, it is a difficult read. Even now, if I pick it up and rifle through parts of it and I get to a part that, it affects me and I've got to put it down. I hope it's going to be easier for people who buy the book to read.
Scott Oake, the co-founder of the Bruce Oak Recovery Center here in Winnipeg and the author of For the Love of a Son, a memoir of addiction, loss, and hope. He's going to be on The Current, by the way, later, right after our program. The book comes out today.
The cold of winter melted by an array of floral artistry to warm your soul. Fleur de Ville Artiste comes to the Leaf at Assiniboine Park January 16th to 26th. Be dazzled by figurines decorated in flowery fashions, designed by Manitoba's vibrant art scene and blossoming floral talent. Fleur de Ville Artiste, proudly sponsored by CBC. Visit cbc.ca/Manitoba/community for more.
We asked you yesterday for a chance to win tickets to that, what your favorite flower is, or maybe what flower has the most meaning to you and why. We've got a lot of lovely stories. So we'll announce our winners in the next hour, and we're going to hear some of those listener lines that came into the show. Right now in Winnipeg, it is -27. No flowers blooming out there this morning. And we have music this morning from Tate McRae. Now, one exciting aspect of a new year is the promise of new music to come in 2025. It's giving us a lot to look forward to. The team over at CBC music.ca has put together its list of 22 albums they can't wait to hear this year. So there's new releases expected from heavyweights like The Weeknd to emerging artists like Winnipeg's Sebastian Gaskin. Calgary pop star Tate McRae's third album, So Close to What, is coming out February 21st. From that album, here's It's Okay. I'm Okay. It's the lead single.
See you so excited, you got on lockdown. You move it like I did before I found out. Ain't just a pretty face talker, good with his money, close to his mother. You see you one-sided, you got alright now. And she'd be like, he's so perfect. I'd be like, I'm perfect. Nobody got me as nervous, but baby I've been there. You're biting that sleepless shit, so baby don't get this twisted. No, nothing gonna make me miss it. Hey, girl, it's yours. It's okay, I'm okay. Had them in the first place. It's okay, I'm okay. It's okay, I'm okay. I don't really gotta say it's okay. You can have them anyway. Anyway, you can have them anyway. Anyway, we're such a romantic. You got me like that. Some monsters on the place. Now I can go near that. And she'd be like, he's so perfect. I'd be like, I'm perfect. goes it. Nobody got me as nervous, but baby, I've been there. You're right in the same position, so baby, don't get this twisted. And I think I'll make me miss it. Hey, tell me it's yours. It's okay, I'm okay. Had them in the first place. It's okay, I'm okay. It's okay, I'm okay. I don't really gotta say it's okay. You can have them anyway. Anyway, you can have them anyway. Anyway, it's okay, I'm okay. Had them in the first place. It's okay, I'm okay. It's okay, I'm okay. I don't really gotta say it's okay. You can have them anyway. Anyway, you can have them anyway. Anyway.
Tate McRae, new music. It's okay, I'm okay. That is coming up on an album coming out in February, and it's also featured on CBC Music's list of 22 albums that they can't wait to hear in 2025. Go to cbcmusic.ca to see the full list, and if you're like me and you really need to download more music, then you'll get some good ideas. Start there. Minus 27 in Winnipeg this morning. I'm Marcy Marcusa with our team here at Information Radio. You're on CBC 89.3 FM, 990 AM on the app and YouTube. Over in Brandon, mostly cloudy, minus 23, and there's an extreme cold warning for Manitoba this morning again, with wind chills going to feel like minus 40, minus 45. In Thompson right now, it is minus 26 degrees for your Tuesday start. Well, U.S. President Donald Trump says tariffs on Canada could start as early as February 1st. He made the remark in the Oval Office yesterday, didn't offer any more details, but the issue of trade did come up in his Inauguration Day speech. He pledged a suite of promises to address energy, the environment, and the automotive industry. We have analysis coming up in the next half hour of the program, but to set us up, let's hear a bit more of what President Trump had to say.
The inflation crisis was caused by massive overspending and escalating energy prices, and that is why today I will also declare a national energy emergency. We will drill, baby, drill. America will be a manufacturing nation once again, and we have something that no other manufacturing nation will ever have, the largest amount of oil and gas of any country on earth, and we are going to use it. We will bring prices down, fill our strategic reserves up again, right to the top, and export American energy all over the world. We will be a rich nation again, and it is that liquid gold under our feet that will help to do it. With my actions today, we will end the Green New Deal, and we will revoke the electric vehicle mandate, saving our auto industry and keeping my sacred pledge to our great American auto workers. In other words, you'll be able to buy the car of your choice. We will build automobiles in America again at a rate that nobody could have dreamt possible just a few years ago. And thank you to the auto workers of our nation for your inspiring vote of confidence. We did tremendously with their vote. I will immediately begin the overhaul of our trade system to protect American workers and families. Instead of taxing our citizens to enrich other countries, we will tariff and tax foreign countries to enrich our citizens.
So that is U.S. President Donald Trump, Inauguration Day yesterday, and already he was talking about a whole bunch of specifics. The one Canada's been watching for is the deadline on the 25% proposed tariff, and he did put a February 1st date on that. It is not firm, but we're going to have some more analysis coming up in business news, and then also we have a full interview about it, so stay right here. Right now, though, let's get to Manitoba stories from your CBC Manitoba newsroom.
This is CBC News. Good morning. I'm Heather Wells in Winnipeg. At 6:30, it is minus 27. Yes, we wake up to yet another extreme cold warning covering all of southern Manitoba today. But the temperature does begin to moderate later today. Search warrant documents obtained by CBC News are shedding light on allegations against 5 Western Manitoba contractors accused of conspiring to manipulate dozens of government contracts. CBC I-Team's Caroline Bargout has the story.
2 anonymous letters, public housing contracts that raised concerns. Those were some of the reasons the Manitoba government decided to hire a private company to look into several Brandon area businesses. That review led to a criminal investigation by the Competition Bureau in 2015 and ended with fraud charges against 5 Westman contractors in 2022. All of it is detailed in search warrant documents obtained by CBC News. 5 contractors are accused of conspiring to inflate prices and deciding amongst themselves who should get each contract by bidding lowest. The contracts in question were worth $4.5 million and doled out over several years, from late 2011 to early 2016. They were to renovate or repair Manitoba housing apartment suites. The accused are expected to appear in court next month to argue a judge should stay the charges, saying it took too long, nearly 10 years, to charge them. Caroline Bargout, CBC News, Brandon.
The Manitoba government has billboards all over Winnipeg boasting of a hydro rate freeze, but critics say the freeze isn't yet official. While Manitoba Hydro has said it will not ask for a rate increase this year, neither the utility nor the province has the final say. Catherine Delay is a lawyer representing the Consumers Association of Canada in Manitoba.
It is a little bit confusing to see, a hydro rate freeze being announced when that authority, in fact, rests with the Public Utilities Board.
Manitoba Hydro will submit its next rate application to the Public Utilities Board before the end of March. That means any change to the rates or freeze would not happen until April at the earliest. Manitobans can expect to see an end to the 4-day deep freeze later today. This frigid weather has been especially hard on the homeless population. In Winnipeg, the Downtown Community Safety Partnership has been responding to calls for help. Matt Halchecker is Director of Operations. He says patrol teams are keeping a close eye on encampments.
Quite regularly, especially during this weather. So we'll go in, we'll make sure that they're staying warm enough, and maybe they do need to go to an emergency shelter for that night if the weather does get too cold for them. So our teams are actively doing that, I'd say, every single day.
Halchecker says the patrols offer emergency care for minor cold-related injuries. More serious issues like frostbite trigger a call to 911. A Winnipeg man says he got carried away when he drove an excavator into buildings and vehicles at a city water treatment plant. The 39-year-old pleaded guilty yesterday to several charges. Court heard he caused more than $1 million in damage to the Deacon Reservoir facility in September 2023. 5 buildings were damaged, along with backhoes, skid steers, and several employees' vehicles. Court heard the man did not deny damaging the facility, but blamed the fact the keys had been left in the excavator's ignition. The prosecution is seeking a 35-month sentence, while the defense seeks 18 months. The judge overseeing this case has reserved his decision. There is a major new development, as we've been hearing, in Washington that could devastate Canada's economy. U.S. President Donald Trump confirming last night he is considering hefty tariffs on Canada. Trump making the comment to reporters while signing a series of new executive orders from the White House last night.
We're thinking in terms of 25% on Mexico and Canada because they're allowing vast numbers of people. Canada's a very bad abuser also. Vast numbers of people to come in and fentanyl to come in.
When do you think you would enact those?
I think February 1st.
25% on both, sir?
On each.
You can hear the latest national and international news coming up on World Report at 7. The University of Manitoba Bison's football program has a new head coach. Longtime defensive coordinator and assistant coach Stan Pierre takes the reins from Brian Doby, who coached the Bisons for nearly 3 decades. Pierre is also no stranger to the program. He's been on staff for 27 years.
I just didn't expect this to be the journey, and to be honest, I wasn't actively searching to be a head coach. If I was, you would have seen my name in many searches.
Pierre began coaching with the Bisons in 1998. 23 of his players have gone on to play in the Canadian Football League and 2 in the NFL. Well, stopping the Jets.
He score! Niederreiter put it through Ingram. Winnipeg is on the board. It's
Nino Niederreiter in the third period on TSN. The first time the Jets would score last night, but it came too little too late. The Jets lose to the Utah Hockey Club 5-2. Coach Scott O'Neill did not mince words.
That was, of all the games this year, that was the most embarrassing game. For me, for our players, I take full credit. I got to be the one that has to hold these guys accountable, make sure we're better. That was embarrassing. We were from top to bottom. We did a job.
Haven't heard the coach bleep before. Jets captain Adam Lowry missed the second and third periods, leaving the game with an injury. Next up, the Jets are in Colorado tomorrow night. You can find more Manitoba news at cbc.ca/Manitoba.
Hey, Heather, just so you know, I don't think he bleeped. I think he swore.
I think you're right.
I couldn't resist. All right. We got to laugh because otherwise we're all going to freeze. So here we go. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Let's get into our regional forecast now. In all seriousness here, we've got an extreme cold warning once again for southern Manitoba. I hope you find shelter. I hope you find warmth because this is day 2, Abby, of dangerous cold.
Yeah, the days of people blipping and, blip. And then when it's cold outside, there's always a blip. Anyway, it's going to be a cold, dangerous wind chills in the southern part of the province. Frostbite is a risk. Winnipeg, right now, we are chilly at minus 27. We're seeing some clear conditions out. And that would transition to more like a cloudy day because the snow is expected to start around the noon period. We'll see the winds blow that around. We're expecting about 2 centimeters of snow accumulation once that system passes us. The winds will be breezy at times and the high will reach around minus 14, but it will feel like minus 41 this morning. And then tonight, the light snow continues through into the overnight. We'll see temperatures drop to around minus 18. Similar conditions we're seeing in the Pembina Valley region where current temperatures around minus 21. Heading west to Brandon, it is minus 23 at this time and mostly cloudy conditions for the Westman region. Snow is going to come in. It's going to continue. We're going to see some blowing snow. High will be around minus 6 for that part of the province, though the wind chill is still going to be around minus 42 this morning. Frostbite is a concern. In the Parkland region, Dauphin sitting at minus 17 at this time. Snow and blowing snow in the forecast. Expect a high of minus 10. The wind chill feels like minus 31 this morning for folks in that region. Looking at conditions in the Interlake region, Gimli's around minus 29 at this time. Snow is going to be starting around the noon period. We will see some blowing snow also later in the day. The high is expected to be around minus 14, but before that, the wind chill is going to be feeling like minus 41 this morning. Then we go up north to the powerful influence region. We're seeing temperatures around minus 22 at this time with light snow there. Expect a high of minus 15, though the wind chill feels like minus 31 for folks in that part of the province. The snow should taper off tonight, and then you see some partly cloudy skies. Then we go farther north. Thompson is at minus 26. We're looking at a high of minus 20. Wind chill around minus 34 at this point. And then in Churchill, we're seeing temperatures around minus 37, looking for a high of minus 32, and the wind chill reaching around minus 48. Try to still get to that minus 50. So the weather still remains bitterly cold across the province. If you see that color on the map, you can know it's still cold. So frostbite is a concern. Down south, the day will be very cold. We're going to see blowing snow, and up north, it remains extremely frigid. We're looking at temperatures feeling like minus 40s, 45, 46 in most of the regions.
All right. Thanks, Abby.
Thank you.
That color is on the map. If you're watching us on YouTube, by the way, it's magenta. It looks like it'd be hot, but no, It's really cold. All right, let's get into what's going on the morning commute with Corey Funk.
Yeah, so far the commute is pretty quiet. Haven't heard of any major issues. Sidewalks are nice and grippy on my way in this morning, but if you do see something going on, if you're walking, biking, driving, I'm sure there's at least one stalled car at every given point around the city, especially with these temperatures. Give me a call. Let me know what you're seeing. 204-788-3093.
Bleep. All right, thanks, Corey. Let's get to business news. Crystal Lee Ramlakan joins us now. Good morning.
Hey, good morning, Marcy.
So obviously we're starting with U.S. President Donald Trump because he didn't implement tariffs on his first day, but he did put a date on it.
Yeah, so he says Canada and Mexico may be hit with 25% across the board tariffs on February 1st. So this is what he said to reporters last night.
We're thinking in terms of 25% on Mexico and Canada because they're allowing vast numbers of people. Canada's a very bad abuser also. Vast numbers of people to come in and fentanyl to come in.
So this comes after Trump officials had suggested the president would only sign a memorandum telling federal agencies to study trade issues. But now he's saying he may consider imposing a universal tariff on all countries. And he says he's going to overhaul the trade system to protect American workers and families. But Barry Schwartz, who is the chief investment officer at Baskin Wealth Management, is actually optimistic about what the fallout may be from all of this.
I'm actually going to take the contrarian view here and say that I don't think things are going to be as volatile or as insane as people expect. I know everybody's calling for the markets to be very volatile, but I would focus on the positive things right now. The U.S. economy is doing great. The Canadian economy just printed a very strong employment report. I think there's a lot of pro-business things that the Trump government will set up. I think it's going to be a really good 4 years for the stock markets.
But, you know, the threat of tariffs is weighing on Canadian businesses. And that's according to a new survey from the Bank of Canada. The central bank polled more than 900 business leaders last month. 18% anticipate their prices will rise with the new U.S. administration, but 11% expect their prices to actually be lower.
Next, tell us more about the Canadian banks that are leaving this climate alliance.
Yeah, so Scotiabank is the latest to withdraw from the Net Zero Banking Alliance. So the bank joins BMO, National Bank, TD, and CIBC in leaving. And the banks started withdrawing not long after the 6 largest banks in the U.S. did the same as the return of Trump to the White House loomed. So the UN-backed initiative aims to accelerate climate action among financial institutions. A Scotiabank spokesperson says the bank is still committed, though, to delivering its own climate transition plan and remains committed to meeting the requirements of regulators around the globe. And a spokesperson for RBC says the bank has nothing to add beyond comments made by its CEO earlier this month when he said the alliance was in flux and questioned whether it was the right mechanism to reduce emissions. But Marcy, the bank is still listed as a member on the alliance's website.
Before we look at the markets this morning, for your final story, the world's political and financial elite are gathering right now. What's on the agenda for this?
So despite the growing gap between the rich and the poor, the World Economic Forum in Davos, Switzerland this week will likely focus again on money and deal making, with causes like diversity and climate change waning in the business world. So anti-poverty group Oxfam International has released a new report that says billionaires' wealth grew 3 times faster last year than the year before. And Oxfam also predicts at least 5 trillionaires will crop up over the next decade. So a year ago, the group had forecast that only 1 trillionaire would appear during that time. Now, Oxfam's research adds weight to a warning by outgoing President Joe Biden last week of a dangerous concentration of power in the hands of very few ultra-wealthy people. The group's report also says that the number of people in poverty has barely budged since 1990. So the World Economic Forum expects to host about 3,000 attendees, including business executives, academics, government officials, and civic group leaders at its annual meeting in the Alpine Village. usage, and the continued rise of artificial intelligence as a tool for business to reap greater efficiencies will also again be a central theme probably, and that's even despite worries in many sectors that AI could upend many white-collar jobs and displace workers in an array of industries.
What is up in the numbers today then?
So in Europe, stocks are mixed. Right now, Germany is down, the UK is up, France is up, and Asia markets are mostly on the rise. Japan is up, Shanghai is down, Hong Kong is up. Oil is down $1.87 to 76.01 US per barrel. Gold is up $17.70 to $2,725.50 US per ounce, and the dollar is down 0.6 of a cent to 69.3 cents US.
All right. Thanks, Crystal.
Okay. Thanks, Marcy.
Crystal Ramlakan from our Business National desk with our report this morning. Well, you know who's happy when it's cold? Festival de Voyageur. They never want the thaw. We talk about it every year. And if it were happening right now, things would be great. It is happening in just a few weeks, though. And they have announced their lineup. A big part of Festival, besides the sculptures, of course, and the food and the celebration, is the music. And we have a tune from a performer that is on the bill this year, going to be playing at Festival. They're known for their unique blend of R&B and neo-soul. This is Cease. You can catch them live on Valentine's Day. This tune's called Wet Paint. Chilling out with a little Cease and Wet Paint. Cease going to be playing this year's Festival de Voyageurs. They play Valentine's Day. The full schedule is up at heyho.ca. It is 10 to 7 right now on 89.3 FM, 990 AM on the app or YouTube. I'm Marcy Marcusa. You are with CBC this morning, Information Radio. And it's minus 27. It's going to be windy today. Winds west 20, gusting up to 60 even this morning. Calming down a little bit, but just still gusting up to 40 this afternoon. Our actual forecast calls for a little bit of snow beginning around noon, about 2 centimeters, and then a high of minus 14. But once again, with wind chill, it's going to feel like minus 41. We are in an extreme cold warning area of Manitoba. That is most of the south this morning. Well, let's talk about President Donald Trump and more about these tariffs and the threat and the February 1st date that he floated yesterday. We have Marco Vellotti with us, editor-in-chief of iPolitics. Good morning to you.
Hey, good morning.
So I watched all of this yesterday. Everybody's leaning in, waiting to see what he'd say about tariffs. There was sort of nothing. And then he gets to the Oval, and in that scrum, he throws out this February 1st date. What's been the reaction from your view? Who have you been hearing from?
Yeah, so not so coincidentally, federal cabinet is holding a retreat just outside of Ottawa. And soon after Trump made those comments, the finance minister, Dominic LeBlanc, and foreign affairs minister, Melanie Joly, quickly huddled to speak to reporters. And the messaging from them was very much business as usual. It's been no surprise that they've been preparing for this possibility ever since Trump made that Truth Social post back in November that he was going to slap Canada and Mexico with 25% tariffs. But even before then, even before the election was called, the work had been ongoing to kind of present Canada in a positive light to American decision makers to kind of discourage what Trump is proposing right now. So from, LeBlanc basically said nothing changes on our end. February 1st, whether it came today or February 1st or some way down the line, we have retaliatory tariffs, kind of lined up to go into effect should Trump pull the trigger here. We're ready to go. Our calculations haven't really changed by this fact that he's now put forward a date. And it seems like he's kind of, not so certain about that to begin with.
What about Premier of Alberta, Danielle Smith, who obviously essentially broke with the other premiers last week on the idea of retaliatory measures?
Yeah, I don't know if the date necessarily will change her mind. Premier Smith's been interesting in that I think early on she didn't kind of hit the panic button like the other premiers did when Trump said those 25% tariffs were coming. I think she thought maybe they could be avoided or maybe some exemption would be put in place for energy products. Trump obviously in his inauguration speech talked about the need to lower gas prices, although instead of insinuating that he was going to make sure that Canadian exports were somehow going to be cheaper, he talks about opening drilling. That being said, she went to Mar-a-Lago, I think, last week or maybe the week before, and her messaging definitely changed. She's certain now that those tariffs are inevitable. But that being said, she still doesn't think we should retaliate in kind. I don't know if she thinks a different approach will win favor with this Trump administration. I'm not quite clear. That being said, I don't think she's going to change her mind until those tariffs actually go into effect and maybe start hurting some industries and within her province. I think that's the only way she might change her mind on this.
I want to ask how you think that we might interpret the news that various U.S. agencies will investigate and fix persistent trade deficits and address unfair trade policies of other countries. So I'm using the language of what we heard yesterday. How are you viewing that?
Before those comments that Trump made about February 1st, I would say this is great news because it seems like we could potentially avoid these altogether. I still think it's a good sign because it does give Trump the wiggle room to say, look, I studied this and maybe we can avoid tariffs on Canada because this report says that Canada, Canada's trade deficit isn't really necessarily problematic. And I do think that, any report looking into Canada's trade deficit with the U.S. is going to be positive for us. Trade deficit, all that simply means is that, the U.S. buys more goods from us than we buy from them. But there's a big reason why that trade deficit exists, and that's because of oil and gas exports. That simply makes a difference. And the reason why that matters is because those oil and gas exports that we send to the U.S., they're raw, they're unprocessed. The U.S. has the refining capacity, and then they ship them globally. So they're allowed to essentially add value to those exports. Unlike, other countries like Mexico and China, that really kind of, those trade deficits are indicative of a manufacturing, that weakness in the U.S. manufacturing. Essentially, they get to undercut them by bringing in cheaper goods. Canada doesn't have that relationship. We're a high-wage country. a lot of Canada and U.S. goods kind of flow across the border back and forth, especially auto manufacturing parts. So I think Canada would do well in any review, so it might still be a good sign despite the February 1st date that he floated.
Depending on the future, though, if drill baby drill happens, then that makes us less useful to him in his view. I'm thinking about
that is true.
Yeah. What overall, when you looked at his inauguration speech and when you listened, and he spoke 3 times yesterday, but what, if anything, signal wise did he give regarding the Canada-U.S. relations overall? Did you hear anything else in his remarks?
Yeah, I think the fact that Canada wasn't mentioned in the inauguration speech is a good sign, and that, targeting us for tariffs doesn't seem to be a quote unquote, big priority. But there's still a lot of reasons for concern. And I think if you look at that speech and you contrast to what he was saying his first time in the Oval Office, there seemed to be a focus first time around on, kind of remedying some of these unfair trade deals that he saw. And of course, renegotiating NAFTA. This time around, he definitely seems to have crystallized this idea that the U.S. trade relationship needs to be recast, needs to be totally reoriented. And he wants to basically help balance the federal budget by cutting income taxes and then putting tariffs on other countries to make up for that lost income. That basically undermines our whole trading relationship since the 80s with the U.S., where we embrace free trade. And that's a huge shift for us, and that's our biggest trading partner, and they start slapping us with tariffs. That's going to increase the cost of everything. So it's definitely, I think, a big cause for concern that, this seems to be an ideological shift on the part of the president, and it's going to have major impacts on Canadian businesses unless something changes.
It was fascinating him navigate the TikTok thing from the Oval Office last night. Basically signing an order saying 90 days, it's up to China, and if they do the deal, we want 50% of the revenue. Like, it was like watching a live business deal from the shift sort of in style and tone. Is it rhetoric? Is it not? As he's signing these executive orders, right, that are not rhetoric, they're very real. Lots to go through. Thanks for going through the trade issues this morning with us, Marco. We appreciate it.
Of course. Thanks for having me.
Marco Vellotti, editor-in-chief of iPolitics. So speaking of other things that were developing down south yesterday, after 8 o'clock on our program this morning, so later in the program, we're going to get reaction about U.S. President Donald Trump's new executive order that says United States will only recognize 2 genders, male and female. So we're going to talk to a Manitoban who is trans. What happens at the border if they want to go down south, for example? That and, of course, other deeper concerns about that order. Right now, it is 3 minutes to 7 o'clock. Heather Wells joins us with news headlines here. Good morning.
Good morning. We are learning more about an alleged bid rigging scheme involving millions of dollars in public housing contracts. 5 Brandon area contractors were charged in 2022 with conspiracy to commit fraud and conspiring to allocate contracts. In search warrant documents obtained by CBC, the Competition Bureau alleges the contractors' bids were sometimes double the amount they should have been. The contractors are now asking a judge to have those charges stayed because of court delays. Manitobans can expect to see an end to this 4-day deep freeze later today. The frigid weather has been especially hard, though, on people who are homeless in this city. Groups like Downtown Community Safety Partnership and Lighthouse Mission have been responding to calls for help. We'll hear more in our next local news coming up at 7:30.
All right. Thank you, Heather.
You're welcome.
We do have an extreme cold warning for all of southern Manitoba right now. In Winnipeg, minus 27 with wind chills that'll feel more like minus 40. In traffic on the commute, Tyler called. It said there's a stalled car northbound Kenniston at Scurfield. It's in the middle right lane, and backups are just starting. 788-3093 if you have any updates. Well, coming up in the next hour of the show, Fleur de Ville Artiste is on at the Leaf, and we're going to take you on a short winter vacation to a beautiful flower garden. That's because we asked you to share the stories behind your favorite blooms, and we have some tickets to give away to the event at the Leaf, so stay tuned for that. Also, we'll have more on the I-Team investigation Heather was just mentioning. And it is cold. It's dangerously cold. But do you ever notice in the cold, just looking at this from a much lighter perspective, do you ever notice that teenagers seem to not dress well for it? I mean, mea culpa, running outside after my volleyball practice when I was 14, knee pads around my ankles, but not even putting on my sweats. CBC's Jim Agapito is going to talk to some young people about why they're not layering up. Stay with us. Right now, it's time for World Report on CBC.
Today on The Current.
But the higher we get, the more butterflies there are.
50 years ago, 2 Canadian scientists discovered that monarch butterflies fly all the way to Mexico for the winter. This launched an international effort to safeguard the species and show that these insects are worthy of conservation. It's coming up on The Current.
The Current with Matt Galloway. This morning at 8:37, 9:07 in Newfoundland, and on the CBC Listen app.
This is World Report. Good morning. I'm Marcia Young. The transfer of power in the United States is complete, and President Donald Trump's 25% tariff is still very much on the table. Now he's threatening it could come into effect by February 1st. As Tom Perry tells us, Canadian politicians are still trying to convince him those tariffs aren't necessary.
This is an executive order taking a large number of executive actions to secure our southern border.
Okay, sounds reasonable.
Donald Trump was back in the Oval Office signing a raft of executive orders to force through his MAGA agenda when a reporter tossed a question the president's way on tariffs.
We're thinking in terms of 25% on Mexico and Canada because they're allowing vast numbers of people. Canada's a very bad abuser also. Vast numbers of people to come in and fentanyl to come in.
Up to that point, Trump had not specifically mentioned his pledge to slap tariffs on Canada, something he once vowed to do on his first day back in the White House. Federal cabinet ministers meeting in Quebec tried to roll with Trump's impromptu rekindling of his threat.
None of this should be surprising. The one thing we've learned is that President Trump at moments can be unpredictable.
Finance Minister Dominic LeBlanc last night scrambled to respond to Trump's comments, saying Canada has already taken measures to better secure its border and is ready to talk to the Trump administration about them. On tariffs, LeBlanc says the government is still trying to show the administration they'll hurt workers and businesses on both sides of the border. But if the U.S. still goes ahead, he says, Canada will retaliate. Tom Perry, CBC News, Montebello, Quebec.
Alberta business leaders and energy industry insiders are looking for clarity. They want to know if Trump will make good on his threat, and if he does, how their business will be affected. Business reporter Kyle Bax has been getting reaction in Washington.
Canada's largest export is oil and natural gas. At this point, it's not clear what the new U.S. administration is considering.
Not sure how much thought has been given to this date and this deadline. Having said that, whether it's February 1st or March 1st, no tariff is good.
In Washington for the inauguration, Calgary Chamber of Commerce President Deborah Yedlin says Trump's latest comments are a dose of reality.
You know, anybody who had sort of this notion that it was gone was also living in a world of magical thinking.
There is a reprieve for now, as the February 1st deadline seems fluid, but Yedlin says the tariff threat remains very real. Kyle Bax, CBC News, Washington.
Hamas is calling on Palestinians in the occupied West Bank to escalate fighting against Israeli forces. They're conducting a military operation in Jenin. It reportedly began with several drone strikes. Then Israeli special forces were seen entering a neighborhood. Health officials say at least 6 people have been killed. 35 others have been injured. Israel's military calls this a counterterrorism operation and says it is expected to last several days. Palestinian security forces have been working to reassert control over Jenin. In Turkey. At least 66 people have been killed in a fire at a ski resort. It happened in the northwestern province of Bolu. The resort is about 300 kilometers east of Istanbul. Officials say at least 2 people died trying to escape by jumping from the 12-story building. Others hung bed sheets out of their windows. At least 51 other people were injured. Several guests say the fire alarms weren't working at the time. The cause is under investigation. UK Prime Minister Keir Starmer is calling for a public inquiry into the killings of 3 girls. They were murdered last July in a northern English town during a Taylor Swift-themed dance class. Starmer says officials need to explain how they failed to stop the attacker, a teenager known to be troubled. Crystal Gomansing has more.
The tragedy of the Southport killings must be a line in the sand for Britain.
In a packed room at 10 Downing Street, UK Prime Minister Keir Starmer said the blame for the deaths of B.B. King, Elsie Stancombe and Alice De Silva Aguirre lies with the attacker, but acknowledged the government did fail the victims.
I will not let any institution of the state deflect from their failure which in this case, frankly, leaps off the page.
3 times before his deadly knife attack, Axel Rudakabana was referred to a government program to stop people from becoming radicalized and supporting terrorism. Details Starmer and other officials knew but could not reveal during the police investigation and court case. The murders fueled large and violent riots across England. There were rumors of a government cover-up and misinformation about the attacker being an illegal immigrant. It was later revealed that the British-born Rudakabana was also in possession of an al-Qaeda training manual and the poison ricin. He pleaded guilty to 3 counts of murder and attempted murder of 10 others Monday. Patrick Hurley is the MP for Southport.
The nature of the extremist threat has changed, that it's much more around non-organisational, almost kind of self-radicalisation in many ways.
Rudakabana will be sentenced on Thursday. It's unclear when the public inquiry will get underway. Crystal Gamansing, CBC News, London.
A highly contagious stomach bug is on the rise in Canadian cities, and it's hitting people who are homeless especially hard. Edmonton has been experiencing a Shigella outbreak since 2022. Now Vancouver and Toronto are also working to contain its spread. Jennifer Yoon has more.
Workers clean each bed meticulously at Hope Mission Shelter in Edmonton. There's an outbreak of Shigella infections in the city, hitting those without a home the hardest. Shelter manager Elizabeth Klingeberg says it feels like whack-a-mole.
As soon as you would get somebody to the right place, 3 more would pop up.
The bacterial infection causes diarrhea and stomach cramps. There's been an outbreak in Edmonton on and off for 2 years now. CBC tried to speak with someone who had been sick, but nobody wanted to talk. Klingeberg says that shame has made treatment more difficult.
Some people were really hesitant to share about it or mention it. It's embarrassing.
In Toronto, about a dozen people are currently infected, all of them sleeping rough. Local public health thinks there are far more cases out there.
Sticking on hand sanitizer because everybody's getting sick.
Yeah, I know.
So does Toronto street nurse Karen Alamir. Prevention methods are as simple as toilet access and a place to wash up, something those without a home can't always find.
If they're outside using outside as a washroom, there's not always running water to wash their hands afterwards.
In Vancouver, where the infection is also making the rounds, public health authorities like Dr. Rohit Vij say access to sanitation is key.
Improving hand washing sinks in homeless shelters or encampments, increasing accessibility of public restrooms in communities.
And with the bug getting harder to treat with antibiotics, prevention is more important than ever, say experts. Jennifer Yoon, CBC News, Toronto.
An aerospace startup is eyeing a town on Newfoundland's south coast for a spaceport. Ontario-based Nordspace says it is the ideal location to launch rockets and satellites into space. But as Heather Gillis reports, the town will need to change its development rules to allow one to be built.
I won't say out of space, but it came from out of the blue.
Municipalities get applications to build homes and businesses all the time. But one for a spaceport outside St. Lawrence, a town of 1,200 people on Newfoundland's south coast, came as a surprise. Mayor Kevin Pittman has questions.
What's the purpose? Why Newfoundland? Why near the water? How close to town is it? What effect does it have on the residents?
Nordspace wants to launch rockets with tiny satellites from the outskirts of town, satellites to be used for observing Earth and communication. At 16 meters, the rockets are nearly 8 times smaller than SpaceX ones. Rahul Goyal is the CEO.
Well, these are small rockets, so they're not designed to go tremendously far. They're mainly designed to go to low Earth orbit altitudes.
About 1,000 kilometers above Earth at most, in low Earth orbit. But first, the town needs to rezone, change its municipal plan to allow for aerospace development. If they can get off the ground, Nordspace claims it would be the first commercial spaceport in Canada.
But we've never, ever actually launched anything to space from Canadian soil, and far behind the G7 nations and many others. So
Goyle says St. Lawrence is ideal and at a good angle to get in orbit, away from heavily populated areas. If approved, the company expects to start commercial launches in 2 to 3 years' time. Heather Gillis, CBC News, St. John's.
And that is the latest national and international news from World Report. On our main page, Elizabeth Thompson has more on our top story at cbcnews.ca with 5 things to know if Canada hits back against Trump's tariffs. It could cost us. That story, cbcnews.ca. I'm Marcia Young.
Well, day 2 of this extreme cold warning for southern Manitoba in Winnipeg, feeling like minus 40. Thanks for joining us here on CBC's Information Radio. I'm Marcy Marcuso. You're on 89.3 FM, 990 AM on the app or YouTube. It's 7:10 a.m. this hour on the program. Even though it is so cold, why do you always see high school students, teenagers walking around and looks like it doesn't affect them? Bare legs. What's going on? Why don't teenagers layer up? We're going to get into that. Stay tuned this hour on the program. Also, to much more serious matters, at 10 to 8 this morning, we're going to learn more about an alleged bid rigging scheme involving millions of dollars in Manitoba housing contracts. The I-Team's Caroline Bargout is going to be in at 10 to 8 to tell us all about it. Stay with us. First, let's go to Heather Wells for other developing stories.
Good morning. Well, government billboards around Winnipeg boast of a hydro rate freeze, but critics say it's not even official yet. Manitoba Hydro has said it will not ask for an increase this year, although only the Public Utilities Board has the authority to change or freeze rates. The University of Manitoba Bison's football team will have a new head coach when they hit the field this season. Longtime assistant coach and defensive coordinator Stan Pierre becomes the new bench boss. We're going to hear from him and his goals for the team coming up in our next local news at 7:30.
All right, thanks, Heather.
You're welcome.
Abby Adiemi's got the forecast.
It's a cold one for Winnipeg and most of southern Manitoba under that extreme cold warning with dangerously low temperatures and biting wind chills and the range of minus 41. So you need to take her outside. Frostbite happens in minutes.
All right, Abby, thank you.
Thank you.
Layer up, everybody. And Corey with the commute.
Yeah, really quiet commute so far. Sidewalks aren't too slippery. Did get a call from Dan on a bike with just a short reminder. He says there's actually lovely biking conditions out there, minus the cold. But if you see a cyclist without light, it's because the batteries probably aren't working. That's his case. So heads up there. So just be extra cautious for cyclists. Look out. If you do see something else going on out there, though, give me a call on the CBC Commuter line. That number 204-788-3093.
Well, let's return to the top story. Pretty much, one of the top stories around the world this morning because he said so much. Donald Trump on day 1. He's been sworn in as the 47th president of the United States, and he did use his inauguration speech to announce a number of executive orders that he's going to be signing. He signed a whole bunch of things yesterday, including declaring an emergency at the southern border with Mexico and renaming the Gulf of Mexico the Gulf of America. We're going to have analysis coming up, but first, let's hear from Donald Trump. He began his inauguration speech with a familiar message.
The golden age of America begins right now. From this day forward, our country will flourish and be respected again all over the world. We will be the envy of every nation, and we will not allow ourselves to be taken advantage of any longer. During every single day of the Trump administration, I will very simply put America first. Our sovereignty will be reclaimed. Our safety will be restored. The scales of justice will be rebalanced. The vicious, violent, and unfair weaponization of the Justice Department and our government will end. And our top priority will be to create a nation that is proud, prosperous, and free. America will soon be greater, stronger, and far more exceptional than ever before. I return to the presidency confident and optimistic that we are at the start of a thrilling new era of national success. A tide of change is sweeping the country, sunlight is pouring over the entire world, and America has the chance to seize this opportunity like never before.
U.S. President Donald Trump in part of his inauguration speech yesterday. Well, we've been talking tariffs all morning. The February 1st date he threw out, the 25% tariff that could be a reality. Next, let's talk about the border, immigration, and also drill, baby, drill. Thomas Schaller is with us once again this morning. He's a political scientist at the University of Maryland. Good morning again, Thomas.
Good to be back, Marcy.
So why don't we start with what his executive orders were related to the U.S.-Mexican border?
Yeah, there were more executive orders about that than anything else. On immigration, he declared a national emergency, also declared an energy emergency. Everything was an emergency yesterday, and now everything is perfect today. I don't know if you guys noticed, but the immigration executive orders included a return to Mexico policy so that people who are in the border trying to come to the border to deter them in the first place. He ended catch and release, where we would just send people back who did attempt unsuccessfully to enter the country undocumented. He also declared that the Mexican drug cartels are foreign terrorist organizations, so he can use powers that the government created after 9/11 to treat cartels much like we would Al Qaeda or Osama bin Laden, for example. And then I think aggressively, and I think unconstitutionally, Trump declared an end to birthright citizenship, which is protected in the Constitution's 4th Amendment. This would be akin to him declaring that women no longer have the power to vote under the 19th Amendment. So presidents can't just declare by executive order that the constitutional parts they don't like are now unconstitutional. But I think we're going to see sweeping changes at the border and wrap pretty soon.
What does ending catch and release mean?
Ending catch and release is a policy where if we catch somebody, we just send them back across the U.S. border instead of detaining them here in detention centers. So people who try unsuccessfully to enter the country will not be just released back into Mexico.
And what will happen to them?
I assume they'll be detained much like they were, kids in cages and stuff back during the first Trump administration. So we'll see. I don't know. It may be different now.
Just asking questions, obviously, because we're watching our borders here. We had Karen Pauls from Manitoba at the Emerson border for a number of days reporting. So just trying to get a sense of what he's going to do all over the place here. Can we talk a little bit about drill, baby, drill to make the U.S., energy independent? And what does he mean by that specifically?
I mean, we're at record energy production right now. There's higher energy production at the end of the Biden administration than there was at the previous end of the Trump administration in his first term. So I guess we can ramp it up further. He signed an executive order related to Alaska and the Anwar Alaska National Wildlife Refuge. So I suppose we can further ramp up, offshore oil drilling and Alaskan oil drilling and natural gas production. I mean, the United States is a net exporter of energy right now and is at its highest rates of domestic energy production. But I suppose Trump could take it higher if he thinks he can. We'll see.
Another Trump priority is, quote, establishing male and female as biological reality, end quote. What kind of policies may we see flow from that?
Well, on the federal level, the president and the national government can control federal employees and military employees. Can't really affect employment practices for hiring and promotion on gender or race on the state level or with private employers, although I suppose the federal government can impose significant incentives and disincentives. So we'll see what happens. But in his inaugural address, he declared that there's only 2 genders now. So I guess Caitlyn Jenner doesn't exist as of today, even though she is a major supporter of Trump, ironically. But, a lot of this is red meat stuff coming out of the campaign where Trump spent about $250 million on ads about they, them, and pronouns and attacking the Harris Walls campaign for being supportive of transgender people and transgender rights.
Yeah, in the next hour, actually, we're going to have a Manitoban who's trans, asking them about, crossing the border and passports and all of these questions this morning. I just briefly, in the last minute here, Thomas, can you speak to the pardoning of the folks involved in January 6th, including some of the leaders of these groups that have been identified as, white supremacist groups?
Yeah, 1,500 pardons. A lot of the people are already out of prison anyway, so it's just a retroactive pardon of their crimes. But there are many people, felons, including people convicted of seditious conspiracy, like Enrico Terrio, the leader of the Proud Boys, who got a 22-year sentence and will be now commuted. And so really people who are felons, people who attacked our capital are going to be released from prison. I assume within the first 24 hours here. We'll see how long it takes the prison, the federal prison system to process those people out. But there were huge celebrations at one of the Washington detention centers among family and friends of some of the people who have been jailed for felonies they committed on January 6, 2021.
Lots to talk about. Thank you very much for being with us this morning.
Great to be here. Cheers.
I don't remember any other Inauguration Day where we had so much that we had to dig through. So we're going to be doing this, obviously, throughout today and the days ahead and the months and years ahead, probably. But for today, we're trying to get through some of the top line of what was announced yesterday on Inauguration Day. Donald Trump, now officially in office. That was Thomas Schaller, political scientist at the University of Maryland. He is this morning in Washington, D.C.
Be an Iron Man and curl. No, not your hair. This is curling on the frozen ice of the Assiniboine River. Ironman Outdoor Curling Bonspiel is back February 7th to 9th. Form a team, embrace the winter with one hand, a rock with the other, and join the Ironman Outdoor Curling Bonspiel, sponsored by CBC. Visit cbc.ca/Manitoba/community for more.
Still ahead on the show, it is extremely cold this morning, and yet...
You wore vests in this cold weather.
Yeah, no, I don't know how I did it either.
Any regrets?
Very much regrets. It was too cold. I got frostbite on my hands.
Teenagers! Why? Put some layers on. However, were you a teenager? Are you listening? Are you a little older and you're thinking, I actually don't think I layered up either. What's up with that? The CBC's Jim Agapito spoke to some high school students about how they dress, or maybe don't dress enough for the cold weather. We'll have that coming up for you at about 7:40 this morning. Sports up in a few minutes here, 7:22 a.m. on Information Radio. I'm Marcy Marcusa with our team at the show, Travis and Corey and Abby behind the glass this morning, Heather Wells in our news center. So it is minus 27 in Winnipeg, in Brandon, minus 21, in Thompson, minus 25. The morning commute has been pretty good so far. Call us, though, if you do see any problems, and we can pass it along to fellow commuters. Well, we have a bit of music from Juno-nominated Don Amaro this morning, who's going to be releasing a series of 6-song EPs over 2025. The first album of the series is Broken Record Part 1, Heart. Comes out on February 28th. This is the first single. It's called Break the Glass.
Never seem to listen to the ground beneath their feet, to the voices in the oceans, to the whispers in the trees. Now the water's rising, it's getting hard to breathe. It's not my problem, till it's breaking over me. Time's up, break the glass. I hear the wall of the dam just cracked. Put your heart in the burlap sack. You better be ready when the flood comes back. Walls are not the answer when the bottom's caving in. This tide won't stop coming. It's gonna be sink or swim. Ooh, waist deep in the water. There ain't no higher ground. mercy on us now. Time's up, break the glass. I hear the wall of the dam just crack. Put your heart in the burlap sack. You better be ready, ready when the foot comes. Time's up, break the glass. I hear the wall of the dam just crack. It's a little too late to get your life on track. You better be ready, ready when the foot comes back.
Donna Merrow and Break the Glass. This is on Broken Record, Part 1, Hearts. It's going to be releasing a series of new music LPs this year. It's available, this one, on February 28th. 7:25. And Scott Ricker is on the air with us now on CBC. He joins us every morning with sports. Hey there, Scott.
Good morning, Marcy.
So an uncharacteristic loss by the Jets last night, huh?
Yeah, one that Coach Scott Arniel, Marcy, called the most embarrassing of the season. Pretty even first period in Salt Lake City last night against the Utah Hockey Club. But then Winnipeg surrendered 4 straight goals in what ended a 5-2 loss. On paper, this should have been a win for the Jets, given their place in the standings atop the Western Conference, while Utah is currently well outside of a playoff spot. Winger Nick Ehlers says this defeat comes down to one thing, and that is preparedness.
That is not Winnipeg Jets hockey. It's not the first time this year we've played this way. And when you don't play the right way in this league, it doesn't matter who you're playing against, you're not winning that game. We have the team in here to do something great, and when we play the right way, we are dominant. We are great, and it is pretty simple. We're not winning the Stanley Cup with the way that we're playing today.
Jets with a chance to prove those Stanley Cup aspirations tomorrow night, Marcy, when they face another divisional foe, that being the Colorado Avalanche.
Busy day in the NHL away from the ice as well, hey?
Yeah, Connor McDavid given a 3-game suspension for an illegal hit in his last game. That hit saw him cross-check the Canucks' Connor Garland in the face after the Vancouver player basically mauled McDavid, trying to keep him away from the puck. Oilers coach Chris Knobloch says although he doesn't excuse McDavid's actions, it is important to recognize what the best player on the planet has to deal with.
He's under the microscope every time he's on the ice because he's dangerous. Don't give him room. Give him another shot. Hold him a little bit. Tug on his jersey. You know, all those little things that maybe could be called penalties, but maybe not. If you called every single one, then, you know, you're changing the game. It's a fine line, but I definitely believe he puts up more than the average player.
Many, including Knobloch, Marcy, are calling for better protection by the NHL for its star players. By way of comparison, the National Football League protects its marquee quarterbacks to a fault. We saw that over the weekend with a few questionable unsportsmanlike conduct penalties for hits on Kansas City's Patrick Mahomes. Minus the suspended Connor McDavid tonight, Edmonton takes on Alex Ovechkin and the Capitals.
Let's finish with baseball and the Blue Jays' first big signing of the offseason.
I feel like we should play that whole song on a morning like this morning.
I like it.
Warm things up a little bit.
Yeah.
Venezuelan folk music there, La Potranca Zaina, which translates loosely to a beautiful horse. Well, at 30, Anthony Santander, Marcy, is no longer a young stud in the game, but the Blue Jays believe he still has plenty to offer, thus the lucrative 5-year deal they have signed him to. The Jays get a guy in Santander who hit 44 homers last season. That is behind only Shohei Ohtani and Aaron Judge for most in the game. Still, Toronto fans will be hoping for un poco más, por favor, a little more offense for a team that was anemic while finishing last in their division. To that end, could free agent slugger Pete Alonso be next? He's a Florida native. I will not break out any Gloria Estefan or Julio Iglesias music quite yet, but I have it on standby. I think this is a guy they may sign. And just before I head off and staying with warm weather pursuits in Melbourne right now, it's the match of the Aussie Open. Novak Djokovic, Carlos Alcaraz, the youngest and oldest number ones in the world ever, and what a match they're in. Djokovic ahead. Looks, with 3 more games, he can get a spot in the semifinals. And as a guy who's long in the tooth myself, 17 years difference between these two, I wouldn't be totally against that.
All right, thanks, Scott.
You bet.
That's Scott Reguer with Morning Sports on CBC. Well, still ahead in the next half hour of the program, we're going to take you on a short winter vacation ourselves to a beautiful flower garden that you created. You called us with your favorite flowers and the memories behind the blooms and what those flowers mean to you in your life, what they remind you of. So stay tuned. It was all part of our ticket giveaway, and we will announce the winners to see Fleur de Ville Artiste at the Leaf. So stay tuned. That's coming up. We also have a little bit of a traffic note here just before the news. Northbound Keniston approaching Scurfield, still that stall blocking the middle lane. If you have an update on that situation, please call us. But right now, keep right to pass. Northbound Keniston approaching Scurfield. The commuter line, 788-3093. Your CBC Winnipeg News is next.
This is CBC News. Good morning. I'm Heather Wells in Winnipeg. This is CBC News at 7:30, minus 27, and yes, another extreme cold warning in Winnipeg today. In addition, periods of snow beginning around noon today, and it's going to be blowing as that wind will be strong. Our high today is minus 14. We are learning more about an alleged bid rigging scheme involving millions of dollars in public housing contracts. 5 Brandon area contractors were charged in 2022 with conspiracy to commit fraud and conspiring to allocate contracts. In search documents obtained by CBC, the Competition Bureau alleges the contractors' bids were sometimes double the amount they should have been. Keldon Bester is the head of the advocacy group Canadian Anti-Monopoly Project.
Then it becomes not about competition, but more about these actors, with no public input, deciding who should go first and ensuring that from their perspective, they get, a fair cut.
The investigation started in 2015, but charges weren't laid until 7 years later. The contractors are now asking a judge to have those charges stayed because of the court delays. You can hear more on this story with the CBC I-Team's Caroline Bargout coming up in this next half hour of Information Radio. The Manitoba government has billboards all over Winnipeg boasting of a hydro rate freeze. But critics say those ads aren't accurate. The freeze has yet to become official. While Manitoba Hydro has said it will not ask for a rate increase this year, neither the utility nor the province has the final say. Katrine DeLay is a lawyer representing the Consumer Association of Canada in Manitoba.
It is a little bit confusing to see, a hydro rate freeze being announced when that authority, in fact, rests with the Public Utilities Board.
Manitoba Hydro will submit its next rate application to the board before the end of March, and that means any change to the rates or a freeze would not happen until April at the earliest. The end to this frigid spell can't come soon enough for those who are unsheltered in Winnipeg. One downtown shelter says it has seen cases of severe frostbite causing blackened extremities. Those people are then sent to hospital, but the shelter has had to turn away others because the beds are all taken. Peter McMullen runs Lighthouse Mission. It offers hot meals twice a day. He says hundreds of servings of soup and chili are snapped up quickly. McMullen says they can't keep up to the need for certain clothing items.
High demand items like socks, underwear, and mitts. Mitts are really tough to come by because they get wet really easy and they get thrown out. So if we had 500 pairs of mitts, I'd expect them to be gone by Wednesday. That's how quickly we can go through those items.
McMullen says warm boots are another item in high demand. A Winnipeg man says he got carried away when he drove an excavator into buildings and vehicles at a city water treatment plant. The 39-year-old pleaded guilty yesterday to several charges. Court heard the man caused more than $1 million in damage to the Deacon Reservoir facility in September of 2023. 5 buildings were damaged, along with backhoes, skid steers, and several employees' vehicles. Court heard the man did not deny damaging the facility, but blamed the fact the keys had been left in the excavator's ignition. The prosecution is seeking a 35-month sentence, while the defense seeks 18 months. The judge overseeing the case has reserved his decision. A new development in Washington that could devastate Canada's economy. U.S. President Donald Trump confirming last night he is considering hefty tariffs on Canada, making the comment to reporters while signing a series of new executive orders.
We're thinking in terms of 25% on Mexico and Canada because they're allowing vast numbers of people. Canada's very bad abuser also. Vast numbers of people to come in and fentanyl to come in.
When do you think you would enact those?
I think February 1st.
25% on both, sir.
On each.
Earlier yesterday, many Canadians had breathed a sigh of relief because Trump did not specifically mention tariffs against Canada during his inauguration address. You can hear the latest national and international news on World Report at 8. The University of Manitoba Bison's football team will have a new head coach when they hit the field this season. Longtime assistant coach and defensive coordinator Stan Pierre becomes the new bench boss. And what are his goals?
If the players that I've been involved with and the staff members that I've been involved with can look back and say, yeah, that he truly had our best interest in mind. He truly was making us better people, and he had a role in that. Then that's good enough for me.
Pierre takes over from legendary coach Brian Doby, who retired after the end of the last season. Well, the Winnipeg Jets didn't start scoring until the third period.
Shot by DeMello, and he scores! Dylan DeMello with his third, set up by Ehlers, and with 8:12 to go, it's a 2-goal game.
Dylan DeMello on TSN as the Jets were outplayed by the Utah Hockey Club 5-2 the final. DeMello scored on that pass by Nikolai Ehlers. And after the game, a clearly disappointed Ehlers was asked how the team moves on after the loss.
You look yourself in the mirror. Like I said, that is not Winnipeg Jets hockey. It's not the first time this year we've played this way. And when you don't play the right way in this league, doesn't matter who you're playing against, you're not winning that game. And you're letting our goalies down.
Up next, Winnipeg is in Colorado tomorrow night. You can find more Manitoba news at cbc.ca/Manitoba.
All right. Thank you, Heather.
You're welcome.
Heather Wells in our news center. Well, we're about to hear about the cold forecast, but I love this, Abby, because Corey tried to convince his kid that it was fun to go outside.
I know. Well, okay, we had this birthday party that was literally like a 5-minute walk away.
Yeah.
So we bundle our little 2-year-old guy up, and we're like, okay, we're just gonna walk. It's gonna be super chill. We'll put you in your little sleigh. I'll pull you. It's gonna be so much fun. And we pop him in. I start going, and he goes, Dad, I'm cold. I'm cold. Like classic toddler, like making it known that he is cold. So that I'm like, oh, sorry, buddy. So I pick him up, and there's me pulling this empty sleigh with a toddler in my arms, getting blasted by this. It was very cold.
You said he started just screaming, no.
Exactly.
I actually feel like on behalf of all Manitoba, like we should all be able to do that. Like adults, just like walk outside and be like, no.
Because we're all feeling it in our brains while we're waiting for the bus or something like that. Exactly.
So if you're at the bus stop and you want to like lie down and just like basically throw a tantrum because you can't take it.
It'll keep you warm.
Yeah. It will keep you warm. Roll around.
Exactly. It helps.
Channel your inner toddler this morning.
Exactly. The toddlers have it right.
Yeah,
we can learn from them.
Right.
Yeah.
What's the actual temp right now, Abby?
Well, the good news is that it's going to ease a bit tomorrow. The wind chill is still going to be there, but just a bit, so you can go for yes. We still have extremely cold and dangerous wind chills in the southern part of the province for today. We have snow in the forecast in most of the regions down south, with frostbite on exposed skin in minutes. In Winnipeg, we're looking at this very cold morning, minus 27 at this time. The clouds will roll in. We're going to see some light snow around the noon period. We should see about 2 centimeters once that rolls out, and then the high would reach around minus 14 today. But the wind chill this morning feels like minus 41. Heading west to Brandon, minus 21 at this time. Mostly cloudy conditions you're seeing. Also, you have snow in the forecast, with local blowing snow will be coming with that. You should see about 2 centimeters of snow also. Winds will be breezy and the high will reach minus 6. However, the wind chill this morning feels like minus 42. In Dauphin and the Parkland region, we're seeing temperatures around minus 16 at this time. Also expecting about 2 to 4 centimeters of snow. Windy conditions, highs around minus 10. Wind chill around minus 31 this morning. Gimli sitting at minus 28 with that extreme cold warning also in effect for that part of the province. And the Interlake region today, We're expecting snow to start around noon with a blowing snow and about 2 centimeters accumulation. The high will be around minus 14. Wind chill this morning feels like minus 41 for folks in Gimli. Good morning to our friends around the Palm Flin Flon. We're seeing temperatures around minus 22 at this time. Light snow in the forecast. You should see 2 to 4 centimeters also. High around minus 15 and the wind chill around minus 31. In Thompson, we're seeing current temperatures around minus 25 and the high for today around minus 20, wind chill minus 34. And further north, it is minus 36 with ice crystals in Churchill, and the wind chill actually feels like minus 48 this morning. So it's
almost minus 50.
Exceptionally cold.
Yeah, no doubt. All right, Corey, anything to say about the commute?
Yeah, northbound Kenaston approaching Scurfield. There's a stalled car blocking the middle lane there, so keep right to get around that. Heard earlier from Tyler, he called to say that's the backups were starting, so I imagine it's probably fairly backed up by now. If you have any updates on that or anything else you're seeing out there, give me a call. That number 204-788-3093.
All right, thanks, Corey.
Thank you.
Well, of course, we know that this weather can be dangerous. However, we also want to look at this from a different point of view. Have you ever sort of wondered why you see particularly young people standing in frigid weather and then the jackets open if they're even wearing a jacket, seeming impervious to the cold? Well, we thought we wanted to ask, how do they do it? And why do they do it? We sent CBC's Jim Agapito to Grant Park Mall to talk to some young people on their young lunch break.
I'm Adam Dakota.
What grade are you in?
Grade 12.
Can you describe for me what you're wearing right now?
I'm wearing a work jacket from Mark's Warehouse with just a basic hoodie underneath, some sweats and some nice Vans to help me keep me warm in the winter. But even with that, it's so cold out, you just end up freezing. I've actually started wanting to wear a scarf soon because of it.
I see what you're wearing. Are you not cold?
Yeah, somewhat actually. I'm still cold. My face is like frozen basically, but by my legs and everything else is pretty warm still. But yeah, it's really cold out.
Rhea Duick. I'm in grade 10.
Can you describe for me what you're wearing right now?
A very, very puffy jacket, and I couldn't find my ski pants, and then 2 sweaters under it as well.
Are you cold right now?
Oh, yes, I'm freezing.
Your jacket's open, though. Can you tell me why it isn't done up?
I was too cold to zip it up, so I just hid my hands.
Ethan.
What grade are you in?
12. I'm just wearing the sweaters, shoes, and cargo pants.
So runners, no jacket. Are you cold right now?
No.
You're not cold? How come?
I don't know. I don't get cold easily.
Brooke Hannigan.
Can you tell me what you're wearing right now?
A coat and regular clothes, so.
I see that you're not wearing gloves. Any reason why that was a choice?
I don't know. I just couldn't find any.
Okay, I got to ask. An older generation thinks sometimes younger people like yourself are always ill-prepared and not dressed for the weather. You're laughing. What do you say to that?
Yeah, there's a lot of times when I was younger, I was always ill-prepared. But now that I'm getting older, I've started to realize that I need to be more prepared. I used to leave the house without a jacket and just wear a hoodie in the winter time. And now I start to feel the cold a lot more. So I've started to come a little bit more prepared, but it's still lacking in some response.
It's true, honestly. It's true. It's mostly true, I'm going to be honest.
Now, how well do you think you're prepared for this weather?
I would say I'm probably like a 7.5 out of a 10, really. I'm not fully there. If I was, I'd be in like snow pants and scarves and all buttoned up even more.
How well prepared are you for this weather?
I'm never prepared for this weather.
How well do you think you're prepared for this weather?
Very prepared.
And you're wearing a hoodie. You're not cold?
No.
As a student, what's it like then going to school in this kind of weather?
It's rough, especially when you have to take the bus. Just trying to stay warm in the bus shelters. Not a lot of them have heat, so it's a little struggle for that.
It's a workout, and also I kind of walk as fast as I can to get to and from school because I don't want to be in this weather at all.
What do your parents say about the way that you're dressed for this weather?
Sometimes my mom isn't very proud of it because I've been wearing vests because I couldn't find my jacket, but this week I found my jacket, so she wasn't fond of me wearing vests. That wasn't great.
You wore vests in this cold weather?
Yeah, no, I don't know how I did it either.
Any regrets?
Very much regrets. It was too cold. I got frostbite on my hands, so.
What do your parents say when you leave the house like this?
My parents hate it. They're like,
why don't you wear a jacket? I'm like, I don't want to wear a jacket.
It's still going to be cold for the next couple of days. Will you change what you're wearing?
Probably wear a scarf or find my balaclava or something like that. Dig that out. But besides that, I think I'll be wearing the same thing for the next couple days.
Definitely gonna find my ski pants. I'm not walking in the cold like this.
You're going to just wear exactly what you're wearing?
Yeah.
Can you tell me why?
Because I don't like wearing big puffy jackets. It makes me cold. I'm not cold, hot.
Will you change what you're wearing for the next couple of days?
No, probably not.
Why is that?
I'm too lazy.
Are you cold right now?
I mean, actually, no. I'm actually pretty warm right now, so... But that'll probably change in a few minutes.
The addition of trying to understand teenagers when it feels like minus 40. Jim Agapito out talking to some students at Grant Park High School in Winnipeg yesterday about underdressing for the cold. Unfortunately, if you look back, you might even think, I did that too when I was a teen. I know I did. I was saying earlier, walking into volleyball practice with, not putting my sweats on. I'd still have shorts on and those knee pads around my ankles, coat wide open. Go figure, right? If you want to watch that video, by the way, check out our YouTube stream. Well, I want to stay with the idea of cold for a moment, but warming us up, because yesterday on the show, to take a break from the bitter cold, we asked you to share your favorite flower and the memories associated with it. We used those calls to give away tickets to Fleur de Ville Artiste at the Leaf. So congratulations to our ticket winners, Jerry, Jay, Hannah, and Ryan. Thank you to everyone who called, though, and made our listener line just a beautiful blooming flower garden. We wanted to share some of those calls with you right now.
Hi, my name is Karen. My favorite flower are freesias for their absolutely intoxicating aroma.
Hi, my name is Matt Donahue, and my favorite flower is the lady slipper. It just reminds me of when I was a kid walking in the forest with my grandmother. And we came across one, and she was so excited because of how rare they were to see. And it really was a stunning flower.
Hi there. My name is Trevor Crook. My favorite flower is the Manitoba crocus. We have a cabin out on the far side of the farm, and we go hiking out there. And as kids, we always had to avoid stepping over them, so we always needed to be very careful.
Hi, my name is Darlene. My favorite flower is the rose. So our kids were really shy, and my husband's line was always, you can't force a rose to open. So that's my favorite flower.
Hi, it's Bridget Weeb. It's hard to choose sometimes, but I'm going to say the beautiful peonies that grace Manitoba, which I really came only into contact with when I moved here, that just bloom and turn into dancing floral gorgeousness.
Hello, this is Maggie Penfold. My favorite flower is an African violet. And the reason for that is it was a favorite of my father's. He loved pansies, and he also loved African violets, and he found them comforting because they're something that his grandmother used to grow. And so when he was about to pass, about 5 years ago, I made sure that I had African violets in his hospital room. And to this day, I find having African violets around me to be very comforting and just a really simple way to stay connected to him.
Good morning. My name is Kristen. My favorite flower is the little wild blue violet that we used to call the Johnny Jump Up. And it's a wildflower, but it's also been cultivated. And I think it was one of my grandma's favorite flowers. We had it on china dishes too. Not only are they edible and used to in Victorian times be dipped in sugar and preserved, they're cheerful. They're beautiful. They look like little tiny faces.
My name is Ron Watts, and I live here in Minnetonka, Manitoba. And I don't know that it's my favorite flower, but I really like lilacs. And there's a whole patch of them growing up at the front of my house. And very often during the spring, it's a complete surprise to me when I go out there. There's just all this scent in the air, and it's really quite nice.
My name is Cheryl. I'm driving on the very cold highway thinking of the summer flower, a native prairie plant called bergamot, also known as bee balm or Monarda didyma. It has a few names because it's just so fantastic and smells wonderful.
Hey there, my name is Ryan, and my favorite flowers are snapdragons. My mom used to have me play with when I was young, and the carnations that I used to always get her for her birthday.
my favorite flower is the forget-me-not. And it is because as a little child, I used to throw the seeds all over my mom's garden and vegetable garden, flower garden, yard, and they grow there still today, 30-some years later. And every spring when they come up, my mom comments, texts me or calls me, or I'm over there and comments on, these flowers, I can't get rid of them. And I think of you every time I plant them, she says. And I now have my own daughter. She's just a few months old, and I hope to be able to instill the same passion and love for plants and for gardening that my mom did in me. And maybe we'll plant some forget-me-nots in my garden too. Thank you. Bye.
No one knows. No one cares. I keep dressing up myself, ain't go nowhere. No one loves me like I do. And to think there was a time when that was you. I won't quit this time. I won't let it in. I guess that
I love that y'all called us about all your flowers. Love that. We got so many calls. So congratulations to our ticket winners again for Fleur de Ville Artiste at the Leaf. You're going to be heading out. And keep them coming if you still want to weigh in. I also popped it up on my Facebook page. Some of you wanted to share photos of flowers. It is 9 minutes to 8 o'clock. We need that to brighten it up because nothing's growing out there right now. Extreme cold across southern Manitoba once again. It's minus 27 currently in Winnipeg. Well, let's return to a story and build on it from the news this morning. We are learning more about an alleged bid rigging scheme that took place in and around Brandon. So the contracts involved work on Manitoba housing buildings. Search warrant documents obtained by CBC shed light on years-long investigations, which led to 5 Westman area contractors being charged with federal conspiracy offenses in 2022. The I-Team's Caroline Bargout is here to talk more about this. Good morning.
Hi, good morning.
So tell us more about the allegations.
So they relate to dozens of contracts that were issued between late 2011 and early 2016 that were valued at $4.5 million. Now, all of them involved renovating, repairing, or refurbishing Manitoba housing apartment suites. Now, 5 local Brandon contractors were charged with conspiracy to commit fraud over $5,000 and conspiring to allocate contracts. Essentially, they're accused of bid rigging. And what that is when competing parties work together to decide who is going to be the winner of a bidding process. So in these kinds of schemes, the parties decide, who's going to be the winning bidder, and that's the person who's going to submit the lowest bid. And so they take turns doing that. Kelvin Bester is the head of the advocacy group Canadian Anti-Monopoly Project. Now, he says allegations like these are quite serious. And if convicted, the accused could get fined or even serve jail time.
We want to get the most for our tax dollars. We want to, see a fair return. We want to see quality public works. We want to know that the companies that are, performing services for Canada and its citizens, it's not just government, it's the people who actually benefit from them, that we're getting good value for money and high quality, and that the outcome of these procurement processes really is the, best qualified candidates. So I think all the way from just in terms of the use of your own tax dollars, but to the quality of our public services, we really need these procurement processes to be competitive.
Now, you were, Caroline, able to get a copy of the search warrants that were executed as part of these investigations. What did you learn from them?
Quite a few things. We learned that this investigation started with 2 anonymous letters that were sent to the Manitoba government that basically tipped them off to possible collusion. Then back in 2015, Manitoba Housing hired PricewaterhouseCoopers to do an external review of dozens of contract awards that it found concerning. Now, the government took those findings to the Competition Bureau, which is an independent law enforcement agency, and they began to investigate. Now, the search warrants say there were several red flags for investigators. For example, in one instance, the documents say that a Manitoba housing operations manager had emailed one of the contractors to say that his company had won the award. But the contractor replied, quote, "I don't think this one is mine." Then he says he doesn't think his company was, quote, "supposed to win." He tells the operations manager, let me figure it out. The operations manager was later terminated with cause. In another case, the search warrants say that housing officials put out a tender to renovate a suite that they thought was expected to cost about $16,000. All the bids that they received from these 3 contractors were more than $30,000. The housing representative said the bids were, quote, out of whack and asked the contractors to submit lower bids. Shannon Saltarelli is the housing coordinator for the city of Brandon. Now, she wasn't involved in this case and she couldn't comment on it. But she did say that the need for affordable housing in the city is great and there's only so much money to go around.
This is a really important piece that the province is having to spend more money than they need to in one area, and it's pulling back on the supports. It hurts the people the most. It doesn't hurt you or I. It doesn't hurt the developer. It hurts the people that are living there and needing that space and needing that support, and we need those units to be renovated and flipped as fast as possible. As people are moving out of community housing, there's a wait list.
Now, there were 5 contractors that were charged. They were charged in late December 2022. That's 7 years after this investigation into the allegations began.
So then what are the contractors saying?
We contacted them and their lawyers. We didn't hear back from anyone. But they did file affidavits in the Manitoba Court of King's Bench. They've been asking a judge to stay the charges against them because they say that this investigation and the charges have taken just too long. One of the accused contractors, Doug Gunnarsson, wrote in his affidavit that he was never contacted by anyone about his alleged involvement and his properties were never searched. He says he had, quote, no knowledge of this matter whatsoever until he got a letter in December 2022 telling him he had a court date in Brandon. Another one of the accused, his name is Guy Pringle, he wrote in his affidavit that he thought the investigation was complete because he hadn't heard anything about it for a very long time. Then he says, to find out over 6 years later that I was being charged criminally was shocking to me and detrimental to my business and to my health. Now, none of the allegations against the contractors have been proven in court, and the 5 of them are scheduled to appear in court on February 5th.
All right, Caroline, thank you.
Thanks.
So Caroline Bargut is with the CBC Manitoba's I-Team, and there'll be more in the story tonight on CBC News at 6. You can also read more details on our website, cbc.ca/Manitoba. We do have a traffic note that's been developing this half hour that I neglected to mention earlier, but we got a call about the southbound Slaw-Rebchuk Bridge. So the Salter Bridge there. Pam says there's a collision in the right-hand lane. It is backed up all the way to Dufferin. So that had been about 20 minutes ago. Not sure if there's any breathing room now or whether or not things are just getting worse. So southbound Slaw-Rebchuk Bridge, a collision in the right-hand lane backed up to Dufferin. Give us a call if you're in that area and things have changed, or even if they're still the same. You can call Corey on the Commuter line at 788-3093. And while we're talking commute, please let us know what other conditions are like out there. Corey ran in this morning, said it was crunchy underfoot, but pretty grippy, so not too bad. If you're driving, it could be a little slick, of course, at the different intersections. 788-3093. We'll dip into the weather forecast right after we hear from Heather Wells. It is 3 minutes now to 8 o'clock, and she's here with our CBC Manitoba News headlines.
Good morning. Well, government billboards around Winnipeg boast of a hydro rate freeze, but critics say it's not even official yet. Manitoba Hydro has said it will not ask for an increase in rates this year, although only the Public Utilities Board has the authority to change or freeze rates. And Canada's inflation rate continues to fall. Numbers just released from Statistics Canada show inflation in this country dipped to 1.8% last month from 1.9% in November. It says the biggest factor in the decline was the federal government's temporary GST break. Without it, StatsCan says inflation would have increased by close to half a percentage point. We'll hear more coming up on World Report and in our next Manitoba News at 8:30.
All right. Thanks, Heather.
You're welcome.
In our Manitoba forecast, Winnipeg specifically, mostly cloudy today, minus 27 across all of the south here, an extreme cold warning. And that does include here in Winnipeg. So we're going to get a little bit of light snow around noon. The cloud cover is going to increase for us. And then winds are going to be west 20, gusting up to 60 this morning. Oh, that wind. It'll calm down a little, but it's still going to be gusting up to 40 this afternoon. Our actual high is minus 14, but with wind chill, as I've been mentioning, going to feel like minus 41. Coming up after 8 o'clock, during his inauguration yesterday, President Donald Trump announced he will sign an executive order proclaiming the U.S. government will only recognize 2 sexes, male and female, and that it cannot be changed. Comments that some are calling dehumanizing. We're going to talk to the executive director of Trans Manitoba after 8 o'clock to hear more. Right now, World Report is up next, and we're about to hear more about the entire day and all of the orders that Trump signed. Stay with us.
Today on Q with Tom Power. Tamara Lindemann, a.k.a. The Weather Station, is back with her brand new, highly anticipated album, Humanhood. In it, she chronicles a difficult mental health period in her life as she navigated an increasingly fractured and warming world. Tamara will be here to tell you how she turns to music to make sense of it. That's coming up on Q, followed by Commotion with Elamine Abdel Mahmoud on CBC Radio 1, the CBC Listen app, and everywhere you get your podcasts.
The CBC News is next. Coming up in half an hour, it's The Current with Matt Galloway.
50 years ago, 2 Canadian scientists discovered that monarch butterflies fly all the way to Mexico for the winter. This launched an international effort to safeguard the species and show that these insects are worthy of conservation. That's coming up on The Current.
This is World Report.
Good morning. I'm Marcia Young. Today, Donald Trump begins his first full day as the 47th President of the United States. He has laid out his agenda, and leaders from around the world are watching to see how his mandate will impact them. The CBC's Chris Reyes joins me now from Washington. Chris, what are we expecting from the new president today?
Yeah, day one indeed. Good morning. This is a country that's now under a national emergency, with an administration empowered with sweeping mandates to deal with illegal immigration and sealing the southern border. That means at any moment, President Trump can activate the military and free up federal resources to deal with the approximately 11 million illegal immigrants in this country and those who may still cross the border. Does that mean that immigration raids will happen today? Not that we anticipate. Those cities like Chicago are preparing for that. Another thing that we can expect today is that more people will be released from jail who were involved in that violent attack on the Capitol on January 6th. And then finally, as of today, the U.S. is no longer a part of the Paris Accord and the World Health Organization.
What else are we expecting from Donald Trump as he gets to work in the White House?
Well, let's talk tariffs. Trump's administration will hit the ground running today with an order to look into the country's trade imbalances, how they affect national security, what can be done to bring down inflation, and how tariffs may help in all of that. He has set a deadline for delivering that report by April this year. Now, he did not sign an order to activate the 25% tariff that he's been threatening against Canada, but when asked when he might impose it, here's what he said from the Oval Office.
We're thinking in terms of 25% on Mexico and Canada because they're allowing vast numbers of people and fentanyl to come in. I think we'll do it February 1st on each.
And so it begins a second term of what we've come to know as the Trump style of governing, essentially a lot of confusion between when a threat becomes an actual order and when a detail is just a negotiation tactic or an actual deadline. We wait and see today. On his schedule is meetings with congressional leaders on the Hill.
Thank you, Chris.
Thank you.
The CBC's Chris Reyes in Washington. For now, that February 1st date Chris mentioned remains a threat, and not U.S. government policy, but if Trump follows through, it could devastate Canada's economy. Janice McGregor is in our Parliamentary Bureau. And Janice, let's dig into what Trump is saying. How likely is this to happen?
Marcia, it's not clear this February 1st date is serious. It wasn't part of any prepared speech or formal announcement yesterday. It's not referenced in the 8-page America First trade policy that the administration released last night. It's possible that Donald Trump only said it because a reporter asked about it as the cameras rolled during his photo op, and he didn't want to look like he was backing down. This restated threat is consistent with his false suggestion that tariffs are a way for foreign countries to pay for the income tax cuts that he's promised his supporters. but it's otherwise inconsistent with this published trade policy last night. That document mentions investigating the feasibility of a global supplemental tariff to offset trade imbalances, and Canadians argue the trade here isn't actually unbalanced. It also mentions assessing appropriate trade and national security measures to address unlawful migration and fentanyl flows, which Canadians argue isn't nearly as serious a problem on their border. But the April deadline for that work, Trump's suggestion of tariffs slapping on February 1st would be an action taken before his administration even finishes these investigations.
So how seriously is Canada taking these latest tariff remarks?
Canada's ambassador in Washington will be joining Cabinet at its retreat today. We're expecting to hear from the Prime Minister, no doubt other premiers and business leaders too, as everyone processes this. It continues to shape the Liberal leadership race too. Mark Carney out late last night saying correctly that what Trump is musing about would be a blatant violation of our trade agreements. And he's now lining up with his rival, Chrystia Freeland, saying dollar for dollar retaliatory tariffs should be a given. But that's an approach more aggressive and magnitudes more expensive for Canadian businesses and consumers than the initial retaliation that we understand the Trudeau government is working on.
Thanks, Janice.
You're welcome.
The CBC's Janice McGregor in Ottawa. Among Trump's first actions in office, once again, withdrawing the U.S. from the Paris Climate Agreement. He also did it when he was elected back in 2016. The CBC's international climate correspondent Susan Ormiston has more on the move.
The next item here is the withdrawal from the Paris Climate Treaty.
Trump signed the order at a sports arena in Washington. The U.S. will no longer partner with nearly every other country in an international pact to limit global warming and curb harmful carbon emissions.
It is deplorable that the President of the United States has decided to pull out of the Paris Agreement. It is unfortunately not the first time that he's done that.
Environment Minister Stephen Guilbeault says Trump's timing is tragic.
And it is quite ironic that the president would do that as California is going through one of the worst forest fire season in its history.
And on the heels of the hottest year on record, denying a climate crisis, Trump says there's an energy emergency, promising a huge lift in oil and gas production and exports, an end to electric vehicle mandates and other green incentives. It was expected.
Coalitions are strong. People are really connected and working together at the community level.
Climate groups are prepared for the fight back, says Elizabeth Lean with All in America.
States have actually a tremendous amount of power to make sure that they remain focused on those climate goals and the climate agenda.
Biden's administration injected $96 billion of clean energy grants into the economy, but don't expect more, says Kevin Book of Clearview Energy Partners.
I think it's safe to say that the energy transition is still directionally going forward, but it might be going slower.
Trump's team appears determined to unravel the U.S.'s climate agenda. Susan Ormiston, CBC News, Toronto.
Now that Donald Trump is U.S. president, some of Canada's biggest banks are walking away from a global climate coalition. Scotiabank announced yesterday it is leaving the Net Zero Banking Alliance. BMO, National Bank, TD, and CIBC all made similar announcements last Friday. Scotiabank says it is still committed to its climate transition plan. It makes no reference to the banking coalition's goal of reaching net zero greenhouse gas emissions by the year 2050. In Turkey, at least 66 people have been killed in a fire at a ski resort. It happened in the northwestern province of Balu. The resort is about 300 kilometers east of Istanbul. Officials say at least 2 people died trying to escape by jumping from the 12-story building. Several guests say the fire alarms weren't working at the time. The cause is under investigation. At least 17 people are dead in flash flooding on Indonesia's main island of Java. Torrential rains caused landslides that destroyed villages yesterday. Rescuers are searching for 8 people. Landslides are frequent in Indonesia, especially during the rainy season. Deforestation and illegal mining operations have decreased the stability of the land in extreme weather. A highly contagious stomach bug is on the rise in Canadian cities, and it is hitting people who are homeless especially hard. Edmonton has been experiencing a Shigella outbreak since 2022. Now, Vancouver and Toronto are also working to contain its spread. Jennifer Yoon has more.
Workers clean each bed meticulously at Hope Mission Shelter in Edmonton. There's an outbreak of Shigella infections in the city, hitting those without a home the hardest. Shelter manager Elizabeth Klingeberg says it feels like whack-a-mole.
As soon as you would get somebody to the right place, 3 more would pop up.
The bacterial infection causes diarrhea and stomach cramps. There's been an outbreak in Edmonton on and off for 2 years now. CBC tried to speak with someone who had been sick, but nobody wanted to talk. Klingeberg says that shame has made treatment more difficult.
Some people were really hesitant to share about it or mention it. It's embarrassing.
In Toronto, about a dozen people are currently infected, all of them sleeping rough. Local public health thinks there are far more cases out there.
Sticking out hand sanitizer because everybody's getting sick.
Yeah, I know.
So does Toronto street nurse Karen Alamir. Prevention methods are as simple as toilet access and a place to wash up, something those without a home can't always find.
If they're outside using outside as a washroom, there's not always running water to wash their hands afterwards.
In Vancouver, where the infection is also making the rounds, public health authorities like Dr. Rohit Vij say access to sanitation is key.
Improving hand washing sinks in homeless shelters or encampments, increasing accessibility of public restrooms in communities.
And with the bug getting harder to treat with antibiotics, prevention is more important than ever, say experts. Jennifer Yoon, CBC News, Toronto.
And that is the latest national and international news from World Report. News anytime at cbcnews.ca. I'm Marcia Young.
Well, day 2 of really frigid cold and extreme warnings about the cold across southern Manitoba today. I'm Marcy Marcusa. Thanks for joining us. This is Information Radio on CBC 89.3. Also 9:90 a.m. on the app and YouTube this morning, wherever you're joining us. Thank you. Well, this half hour, we're going to hear more from Scott Oak, a Manitoban and veteran sportscaster, a broadcaster who has just released a book. It's out today. It is all about his son. It's called For the Love of a Son, a memoir of addiction, loss, and hope. So stay tuned. We'll hear more from him. He's going to be on The Current this hour. Also, this half hour on the program, we're going to hear some reaction about U.S. President Donald Trump's new executive order that says the United States will only recognize 2 genders, male and female. That conversation is coming up. Some Manitobans are already calling it dehumanizing. Right now, let's go to Heather Wells for other news this morning and headlines.
Good morning. Well, we are learning more, as we've been telling you this morning, about an alleged bid rigging scheme involving millions of dollars in public housing contracts. 5 Brandon area contractors were charged in 2022 with conspiracy to commit fraud and conspiring to allocate contracts. The contractors are now asking a judge to have those charges stayed because of court delays. So we'll hear more from the I-Team coming up. And the Manitoba government has billboards, you may have seen them all over Winnipeg, boasting of a hydro rate freeze. However, critics say that's not accurate because the freeze isn't yet official. We'll hear more in our next local news coming up at 8:30.
All right. Thank you, Heather.
You're welcome.
Let's get into the weather now. We went up a degree.
Yeah, I just want to say, Marcy, the wind chill did not change.
I know.
Still,
it's minus 26, not minus 27.
But you step outside and your skin feels like minus 41 still.
Yeah.
Chilly minus 26 actually, but the wind chill feels like minus 41 as you step out. Extreme cold warning is in effect for Winnipeg and most of southern Manitoba today. It's going to be dangerously cold. We will see some clouds roll in with snow beginning around the noon period. We should see about 2 centimeters. Then some local blowing snow will occur, so keep your hats on. The winds will be light at first, and it's going to get windy with the gust adding in there. The wind chill, as mentioned, is around minus 41, so be cautious if you're going to be spending time outside today.
Just not really into it.
Yeah, I'm not in. No. I see the temperatures change, and then I look at the wind chill, it's still the same.
We're trying to be optimistic, and then it's like really hard.
Optimism for me
Yeah.
is maybe 16 or 17 more weeks before May long weekend.
Oh, I
That
like
is
that.
optimism for me.
That's a good stat. How about you, Funk?
Yeah, I know. I used to be the kind of guy who was like, there's no such thing as bad weather, just bad clothes get out. But then I had a toddler, and then you got to squeeze one of those things into a snowsuit, and then you just want to go outside, like let's go play. But then it's like a half-hour whole ordeal just to get out the door, and you're just like, Nick, if I could it warm up, so I just got to put on shoes and go out. That would be nice.
We'll get a bit of a break, as Abby's been telling us through the morning. In a couple of days here, I mean, it's still gonna be cold, but it's not gonna be this. So, all right, how is that commute today?
Yeah, you know, it's there's a couple things to keep an eye out for. So all morning there's been a problem northbound Keniston approaching Scurfield. Got an update not too long ago that's still a problem. There's a stall blocking that northbound middle lane on Keniston. So keep right to get around that. I heard about some pretty big backups earlier, so do look out for that as well. Heard from Pam earlier. Southbound Slaw Red Truck Bridge, also known as the Salter Bridge. There's a collision there in the right. I said right lane earlier, but I was wrong. So it was in the left lane. Keep right to get around it. It is backed up all the way to Dufferin, last I heard. So give me any updates if you hear anything about those or something else you're seeing on the roads. Give me a call, 204-788-3093.
Well, let's return to yesterday, a historic day in the States, Donald Trump's inauguration, and he made some bold statements, to say the least, signing a whole bunch of executive orders. He announced he will sign one of those executive orders proclaiming that the U.S. government will only recognize two sexes, male and female.
It will henceforth be the official policy of the United States government that there are only two genders, male and female. This week, I will also end the government policy of trying to socially engineer race and gender into every aspect of public and private life. We will forge a society that is colorblind and merit-based.
Donald Trump also said he will instruct federal employees to use the term sex and not gender, which can refer to gender norms and identity. A lot of groups say the comments are concerning. We're going to talk this morning about what impact this could have on the Canadian transgender community. Charlie O is Executive Director for Trans Manitoba, Inc., and they join us via Zoom. Good morning, Charlie.
Good morning.
So what was going through your mind when you were listening to this?
It's awful to listen to. Like you said, the word that comes to mind is dehumanizing. It's terrible to listen to this misinformation that's based off of a lack of knowledge of sociology, psychology, and basic biology.
That word dehumanizing was a quote, from some in our community here. Tell me a little bit more about what you're talking about there that doesn't acknowledge basic biology. What are you meaning?
I mean, you can't just create legislation that changes basic biological facts. We know that there are more than two genders or more than two sexes, although it seems like Trump is maybe conflating sex and gender here. So that's another thing to parse apart. But we know that intersex people exist, and we know that non-binary people exist, and we know that there's a vast spectrum of sex and gender across biology. This has been proven by science, by sociology, by psychology. It's well-backed data that there's a vast spectrum of sex and gender in humans.
As a parent to a non-binary child, what concerns do you have for transgender youth specifically who are going to be dealing with this news today?
You know, this rhetoric is really dangerous, and this misinformation condones violence towards non-binary, intersex, and transgender people. And it will lead to systemic discrimination and violence and deaths in the United States and possibly socially spill over into Canada. As a parent to a non-binary child, I'm terrified to talk to them about the social climate of the United States and increasingly in Canada. It's heartbreaking and terrifying to think that if they want to know the current state of politics, that I have to tell them that the United States is trying to legislate them out of existence. It's a horrific thing to try to explain to a child that level of hatred and ignorance.
One of my analysts this morning that was looking at this executive order was commenting on Caitlyn Jenner, who backed Donald Trump. And just the analyst's remark was, I guess Caitlyn Jenner doesn't exist anymore to Trump, even though she backed Donald Trump. And I know that when we were down south in North Dakota, I mean, there's an elected representative there that is trans. So I wonder how you're feeling this morning about the prospect of crossing the border. I mean, will you go to the States?
I won't be crossing the border anytime soon. I don't think that my gender presentation or my identity documents will provide me any sort of safety in crossing the border. It's heartbreaking. I don't know if or when I'll see my brother and his kids or my dad again. It's a really scary and dangerous time to be trying to travel and having family and friends in the United States.
Can you elaborate more on your documents? Because that's an aspect of things, right? Because we have a country that said they're not recognizing people outside of male and female gender. So can you elaborate more on that?
Absolutely. So right now, if you want to travel into the United States and you're carrying a passport, currently you can self-declare your gender marker on your passport, which means that no matter what your birth certificate, your driver's license says, if it has an M or an F or an X gender marker on it, on your passport, you can self-declare your gender marker and choose an MF or X gender marker. If you've chosen an X gender marker for your passport, this could potentially create a target on you as a person who is choosing a gender marker outside of the binary options. So when you're flying in or driving in, this could create problems at the border, from potentially not being let in to more likely just a variety of harassment and abuse at the border.
You, in fact, you mentioned your family in the States. You used to live in the States. What led you back to Canada?
When I was 17, George Bush was on the brink of being reelected again, and that social climate was enough for me. It was not an environment in which I felt safe as a young non-binary person living in the United States, and so I decided to leave at that point.
What would you want people to who agree with the executive order to understand this morning about this, and maybe to know about you, about the reality of being non-binary?
You know, gender non-conforming people, trans and non-binary people are just regular people in your community. We've always been here. We are, teachers, we're at your grocery store, we work at your local nonprofit. We're just regular people trying to live our lives with a modicum of human rights, and you can't legislate us out of existence. Saying that we don't exist doesn't make it true. There's been legislation all over the world that tried to claim that queer and trans people don't exist in specific countries, and it doesn't mean that it's not. It doesn't mean that we're not there. We're still here. You cannot legislate us out of existence. And saying that intersex and non-binary and gender non-conforming people don't exist is part of Canada's colonial history too. And it's important that we remember that after several hundred years of attempted erasure through the colonization project, that two-spirit, gender nonconforming, trans and non-binary people are still here, and we're going to still be here no matter what kind of legislation is enacted. We are still here. And it is important to remember that this legislation is not just rhetoric, that it is opening the door to hateful ideas and actions that can and will lead to violence and death in our community.
You were talking about, historically, you were talking about Canada, but I want to ask you, if somebody has a personal belief or they follow a religion and they may have personal thoughts about gender, about male and female gender, those conversations have been taking place for a long time at the individual levels, of course, but I wonder what your thoughts are about why this has escalated in this moment in 2025 to this level.
Trans people throughout history have been a target of this kind of discrimination. It has come in waves throughout history from the beginning of the colonial project, in which the colonizers used religion to dictate that there are only two genders up until nearly 100 years ago with World War II, and having queer and trans people be targeted then as well. We have been targeted with this kind of legislation throughout history, and we're still here, and we're going to still be here continuing to fight for our human rights.
Thank you very much for being with us, Charlie O. We appreciate your time.
Thank you, Marcy.
That's Charlie O., the Executive Director for Trans Manitoba, Inc.
Here's to the bowl. The Professional Women's Hockey League is back. Lace up, strap in, and tune in to Hockey Saturdays on CBC, where you can catch the best women's hockey players competing head-to-head with everything they've got. The puck drops Saturdays at 2 p.m. Eastern on CBC, CBC Gem, and cbcsports.ca. Don't miss it.
Tuesday morning, 8:26 a.m., minus 26 temperature, and let's talk traffic. Tara says on southbound Waverly at Victor Lewis Drive, there's a collision there blocking the right lane. So southbound Waverly at Victor Lewis Drive, collision blocking the right lane. Traffic is still moving, but slowly. And southbound Slarbibchuck Bridge, still that collision blocking the left lane, so keep right to pass. Caller says it is now backed up still, but all the way to Burroughs now is the backup. So you want to maybe avoid that area if you can, or just be aware of why you're backed up and stay right. Next on the show, The Current is coming up after our program here at 8:37. And today, Matt Galloway is talking with veteran sports broadcaster and Manitoban Scott Oake about the overdose death of his oldest son, Bruce. Since his death, Scott and his family have worked tirelessly to help others struggling with addiction. In Winnipeg, they opened that center here. But his journey is now chronicled in a new book that's out today. It's called For the Love of a Son, a memoir of addiction, loss, and hope.
There's not a day goes by that I don't think about Bruce, and certainly I see him every day. Well, every day I get to the recovery center because his urn is right at as you enter the building. We would give everything that we have and everything I have now as Anna's passed to have another day with him. But that's a real conundrum because if he was still here, the Bruce Oake Recovery Center would not exist, and the hundreds of lives that have been saved there wouldn't have been saved. So it's as I say, it's a conundrum, but we carry on.
What did you want to do with the center or the centers?
What we wanted to do from the start, and this is happening, was to ensure that families didn't have to go through what we did, that if they had a loved one struggling with addiction, that they wouldn't have to go out of the province to get treatment, that this would be something of a made in Manitoba solution. I hesitate to use the word solution. That's reaching a bit, I think, in the world of substance abuse and addiction, but that they could get assistance in their own province.
Scott Oake in conversation on The Current this morning. His new book is out today. It's called For the Love of a Son, a memoir of addiction, loss, and hope. Well, right now, there's 2 minutes to our local newscast, but we're going to bring up a live feed right now. This is coming as Liberal cabinet ministers are meeting in Quebec. Trump, of course, we've been analyzing this morning. The president, his inauguration yesterday in the States, Donald Trump, talking about those tariffs on Canada. And he threw out the date that this 25% tariff could begin as early as February 1st. So that's the date he threw out. This is Prime Minister Justin Trudeau responding.
Partner in an uncertain world. Notre relation commerciale avec les États-Unis, c'est gagnant-gagnant.
The United States is win-win.
On va donc continuer
So we will continue to use all tools available to us to demonstrate that.
President Trump also repeated his concerns about the border. While less than 1% of fentanyl and illegal immigrants that enter the United States come from Canada, our government has already acted to address the concerns raised by the President about border security with an over $1 billion comprehensive border plan. We are already working collaboratively to keep our citizens safe on both sides of the border. Of course, if the President does choose to proceed with tariffs on Canada, Canada will respond, and everything is on the table. Working in unison with Team Canada, as Team Canada, with business leaders, organized labor, civil society, Indigenous leaders, and premiers from coast to coast to coast, we are prepared for every possible scenario. In fact, just last night, I spoke to Premier Ford in his capacity as chair of the Council of the Federation, and he reiterated his unwavering commitment on behalf of Canadian premiers to working all together.
So that is live right now, taking the feed from CBC Newsnet. That's Prime Minister Justin Trudeau speaking about some of the things that were mentioned yesterday down south on Inauguration Day for Donald Trump. Of course, the border and responses there also to the idea that the 25% proposed tariff from the states could go in on February 1st. And you heard that, counter tariffs is something that is going to be on the table. So we'll have more from the Prime Minister coming up throughout the day. But right now, to your CBC Winnipeg News.
This is CBC News. Good morning. I'm Heather Wells in Winnipeg at 8:30. It's minus 26. An extreme cold warning for another morning covering all of southern Manitoba. In Winnipeg today, that wind is going to pick up and periods of snow beginning around noon. It'll be blowing, and our temperature today, even though it'll be windy and cold, our temperature will climb to minus 14. Search warrant documents obtained by CBC News are shedding light on allegations against 5 Western Manitoba contractors accused of conspiring to manipulate dozens of government contracts. CBC I-Team's Caroline Bargout reports.
2 anonymous letters, public housing contracts that raised concerns. Those were some of the reasons the Manitoba government decided to hire a private company to look into several Brandon area businesses. That review led to a criminal investigation by the Competition Bureau in 2015 and ended with fraud charges against 5 Westman contractors in 2022. All of it is detailed in search warrant documents obtained by CBC News. 5 contractors are accused of conspiring to inflate prices and deciding amongst themselves who should get each contract by bidding lowest. The contracts in question were worth $4.5 million and doled out over several years, from late 2011 to early 2016. They were to renovate or repair Manitoba housing apartment suites. The accused are expected to appear in court next month to argue a judge should stay the charges, saying it took too long, nearly 10 years, to charge them. Caroline Bargout, CBC News, Brandon.
Canada's inflation rate continues to fall. It dipped down to 1.8% last month from 1.9% in November. Statistics Canada this morning says the biggest factor in the decline was the federal government's temporary GST break. Without it, StatsCan says the inflation rate would have increased by close to half a percentage point. Now, here in Manitoba, inflation actually edged higher last month from 0.9% in November to 1.1% in December. Government billboards around Winnipeg boast of a hydro rate freeze, but critics say it's not yet official. Manitoba Hydro has said it will not ask for an increase this year, although only the Public Utilities Board has the authority to change or freeze rates. Finance Minister Adrian Sala is responsible for Manitoba Hydro.
This is an important commitment right now. We know Manitobans are struggling with affordability challenges, and so we're really proud to have delivered on that. Over 2025, a hydro rate freeze that will save Manitobans money in every corner of the province.
Consumer advocates and the PCs worry a rate freeze now could lead to bigger hikes in future years. Manitoba Hydro will submit its rate application to the Public Utilities Board by the end of March. The earliest the board could issue a decision would be in April. Manitobans can expect to see an end to the 4-day deep freeze later today at long last. This frigid weather has been especially hard on the homeless population. In Winnipeg, the Downtown Community Safety Partnership has been responding to calls for help. Matt Hallchucker is Director of Operations and says patrol teams are keeping a close eye on encampments.
Quite regularly, especially during this weather. So we'll go in, we'll make sure that they're staying warm enough, and maybe they do need to go to an emergency shelter for that night if the weather does get too cold for them. So our teams are actively doing that, I'd say, every single day.
Hallchucker says the patrols offer emergency care for minor cold-related injuries. More serious injuries like frostbite trigger a call to 911. A Winnipeg man says he got carried away when he drove an excavator into buildings and vehicles at a city water treatment plant. The 39-year-old pleaded guilty yesterday to several charges. Court heard the man caused more than $1 million in damage to the Deacon Reservoir facility in September 2023. 5 buildings were damaged, along with backhoes, skid steers, and several employees' vehicles. Court heard the man did not deny damaging the facility, but blamed the fact the keys had been left in the excavator's ignition. The prosecution is seeking a 35-month sentence, while the defense seeks 18 months. The judge overseeing the case has reserved his decision. And the University of Manitoba Bison's football program has a new head coach. Longtime defensive coordinator and assistant coach Stan Pierre takes the reins from Brian Doby, who coached the Bisons for nearly 3 decades. Pierre, also no stranger to this program, he has been on staff for 27 years.
I just didn't expect this to be the journey, and to be honest, I wasn't actively searching to be a head coach. If I was, you would have seen my name in many searches.
Pierre began coaching with the Manitoba Bisons in 1998. 23 of his players have gone on to play in the Canadian Football League and 2 in the NFL. You can find more news updated throughout the day. Just head to cbc.ca/Manitoba.
Thank you, Heather Wells.
You're welcome.
And thank you to Megan Ketcherson and Joni Nicolo out there this morning in our news center. Also, those who worked on our program today, Marshall Hodgins, Jim Agapito, Chloe Friesen, Issa Kickson, Suzanne Dufresne, and Caroline Bargut, all with items on InfoRed today. Thank you. Thanks to our leaders in unit, Nellie Gonzalez and Leif Larson. All right, last look at the commute, Corey.
Yeah, southbound Waverly at Victor Lewis Drive. There's a collision blocking that southbound curb lane. As well, northbound Kinnison approaching Scurfield, there's a stall blocking the northbound middle lane. And the southbound Slaw Reb Truck Bridge, keep right because there's a collision blocking the left lane, backed up all the way to Burroughs.
Abby.
Overall, extremely cold and dangerously cold across, but Winnipeg not left out. We're in for that cold one. Snow is expected around the noon period with local blowing snow. Tonight it tapers off and we see clear skies in the morning. We're ending the day at minus 26, but it still feels like minus 41.
You know what? Someone was once on the air here talking about how they keep items in their car, and they were talking about food, actually, like handing granola bars out the window till they come across people who are unhoused. I think that today I wish that I packed my car with extra mitts, scarves, like things that are kind of in the house. I'm privileged to have that lying around. It's just to give them away, because man. So keep everyone in mind today. Stay safe out there, stay warm out there, take care out there, and join us again tomorrow for Information Radio here from our home in Live in Winnipeg.